Chapter 91 Entering the Tower. The Berserk skill was powerful. At the moment, he had only one skill suitable for this situation, and it was from the same spell series as Bone Armor, the Bone Spear skill. Bone Spear, Intermediate Mastery, Proficiency, 15.2%. Bone Spear summons a sharp, ethereal spear made of bone to pierce through enemies. Travels up to 10 meters. This was the skill he had gained upon advancing to rank 1, starting at Intermediate Mastery, a level Michael could rely on even in combat. Bone Spear. Michael activated the skill, and 5 magic circles materialized behind him in mid-air. From these circles, white bone spears emerged, sharp and menacing. Without hesitation, Michael launched them at the metal door. Boom! Bang! The spears struck the door with immense force, complementing the orc's relentless punches. It's working, he noted, feeling a surge of motivation. Spurred by this progress, Michael channeled more mana and began to repeatedly fire bone spears at the door. While he considered involving Lucky and Prince, he refrained, concerned that their raw power might risk damaging anything valuable inside the tower. The tower structure itself was unusual. Aside from the entrance, the tower had no visible openings. Out of curiosity, Michael had used Detect on the walls. Blackstone, a highly durable material and an excellent conductor of mana, ideal for creating defensive tools. Even the walls were formidable, akin to a tortoise shell. The entire tower was designed like a fortress. For the same reason he didn't have Lucky or Prince attack the entrance, Michael refrained from targeting the walls. However, a thought lingered in his mind. If this building doesn't yield anything useful, I'll lay the whole thing bare just to collect some Blackstone. He didn't know if this material existed in abundance outside the land of origin, but its impressive properties suggested it would fetch a high price. That was all that mattered to him. Money. He was way too broke. A few minutes later, just as Michael's mana pool had been reduced to about half its total, the last remnants of energy in the magic circles on the metal door finally faded away. The orc, still under the effects of Berserk, a skill that consumed mostly stamina, which it has more than enough of as an undead, delivered another punch. This time, without the magic circles to absorb the impact, a massive dent appeared on the door. Michael's eyebrows raised slightly at the sight. Even the material used to make the door is special. I guess that's expected if it was capable of holding magic circles for years. He was genuinely delighted by the discovery. At this point, it felt like the entire tower itself might be the real reward of this ruin. With the magic circles destroyed, it only took a few more punches and a hard pull for the orc to completely dislodge the door, leaving the entrance wide open. As he stored the fragments of the black metal door in his storage space, Michael activated Detect to learn more about it. Void Steel, a rare, durable black metal that retains magical energy for extended periods. Resistant to physical damage and mana corrosion, it seamlessly integrates with enchantments. Yet another fancy material. The discoveries Michael had made so far only highlighted the grandeur of this ruin at its peak. Though he couldn't pinpoint the exact value of the materials he had gathered, their descriptions made it clear they were extremely valuable. He speculated their worth might rival that of spirit crystals. However, determining the rank was another matter. Spirit crystals from unranked creatures were classified as unranked, while those from rank 1 monsters held significantly more energy, earning them the rank 1 designation. A single rank 1 spirit crystal was priced at $100,000 in the Supers Association store, 5 times the price of an unranked crystal. Michael doubted the materials he had looted from the gargoyles, along with what he intended to gather from this tower building itself, were worth any less. Still, to determine their true value, he would have to wait until he returned to the real world. In the end, Michael concluded that his current haul should be enough to finally provide for his family, clothes to cover themselves, armor for protection in battle, and weapons to fully utilize their strength. All of this would undoubtedly require a significant amount of money. The stronger I get, the more I earn, the poorer I feel, Michael muttered, feeling there were no truer words to describe his predicament. After finishing the task of storing the metal door in his storage space, Michael's eyes finally rested at the open entrance of the tower. Just beyond the entrance lay nothing but darkness. It made sense. There was no opening to let sunlight into the building. However, Michael wasn't discouraged. He had the perfect thing to light up the way. Undead summoning. A greenish-black magic circle appeared beside him, and from it emerged a female orc, an orc shaman, to be precise. This particular shaman wasn't Lily, as Michael had long decided to avoid summoning her bearing the same name as his cousin until she was dressed. It felt far too awkward. In hindsight, naming his first orc shaman Lily had been a mistake. It was better to use other undead in the meantime. That didn't mean Michael had gotten completely used to the sight of naked undead bodies, but he had learned to look past it and endure the discomfort. The summoned orc shaman possessed a fire manipulation skill, much like Lily. Interestingly, not all orc shamans shared the same elemental affinity. Among Michael's 15 orcs, only 5 were female shamans. Of those, 2 had fire affinity, while the others wielded wind, water, and earth. Michael could foresee that, with more evolutions, it was likely he'd encounter some truly unique and rare elemental affinities among his orc shamans in the future. Chapter 92, Exploring the Tower. Light a fire. Michael commanded his undead orc shaman. She obeyed instantly, raising her hand to conjure a small ball of fire. The flames appeared harmless at first glance, but Michael's senses told him otherwise. He could feel the raw potential radiating from them. It was clear this was no ordinary fire. Shifting his focus back to the tower's entrance, Michael took a deep breath, activating his bone armor once more. The familiar sensation of skeletal plates forming over his body brought a sense of security. With the orc shaman at his side, Lucky taking point, and Prince guarding the rear, Michael dismissed the orc that had smashed open the door. He didn't know what to expect beyond the entrance and didn't need an overwhelming number of undead complicating the situation if something did come up. If numbers became necessary, he could always rely on undead summoning to pull reinforcements from the netherworld. Still, Michael hoped that, if he did summon more, it would be to haul loot rather than fight for his life. The moment he stepped inside, a damp, icy cold enveloped him. With the shaman's fire casting flickering light around the space, the hall ahead came into view, a wide, empty expanse lined with open rooms. The air was thick with the scent of mildew. The flickering light of the orc shaman's fire illuminated the crumbling walls. Seems like only the outer walls are made with special materials, Michael noticed. He also felt it made sense. Regardless of the organization, there had to be a level of luxury they couldn't afford. Stay alert, Michael muttered, his voice low but firm. Lucky, the towering undead wolf, growled softly in response. The open rooms lining the walls were eerily still. Michael approached the nearest one, gesturing for the shaman to illuminate the space. As the lights spilled into the room, he saw broken furniture scattered across the floor, tables splintered into pieces, shelves overturned, and glass shards glinting like tiny stars. Unfortunately, though the space outside the room was wide enough for Lucky and Prince to turn around, as long as they didn't stand side by side, passing through the door was impossible. Prince could barely squeeze himself into the room, but it was impossible for Lucky, with his towering physique. Michael had the 2 wolves stay outside while entering the room cautiously with the orc shaman. The room was exactly as he had expected, disarrayed furniture, a few looking like they'd turned to dust with a touch, and glass scattered across the floor, but something was different this time. The destruction didn't have the frantic urgency of an evacuation. It was as if the room had just been left. Michael's senses were on high alert as he stepped deeper into the room, his eyes scanning every corner. As he moved further in, his gaze fell upon the walls, which were adorned with faded diagrams and blueprints. They detailed not only the structure of the gargoyles, but also machinery that seemed designed to enhance and augment them. Metal plates, wires, and strange runes, all fused together in bizarre patterns. Was this a gargoyle production factory or something? He muttered, looking at the designs. The orc shaman's fire flickered, casting dancing shadows across a rusted workbench that looked like it had not been in use for a very long time, but its placement seemed to tell a story. Tools were scattered around, metal parts half-finished, as though someone had been in the middle of crafting something when everything was abandoned. Among the debris, Michael spotted more sketches, this time showing partial figures, stone-like, armored beings with jagged limbs and sharp features. Gargoyles. These aren't finished, Michael mused aloud. They were still building them. He stepped back and motioned for his undead to follow him. The deeper into the tower they went, the more the pieces of the puzzle seemed to fit together. This place was a factory, each room designed to craft different parts for gargoyles, each piece a component of some larger, terrifying machine. As they made their way through the first floor, the pattern was clear. Every room seemed dedicated to a different stage in the creation of the gargoyles. Michael could almost hear the clang of hammers and the hum of energy filling the air as the work had been in progress. "There's no way this was just some research outpost," he muttered. "This was a weapons factory. This entire place, it looks like it was meant for war." Michael couldn't help but wonder what location in the land of origin he had ended up in. "Hopefully it's not some war-torn continent or something," Michael muttered under his breath. Unfortunately, location wasn't something that could be controlled unless they killed themselves to change locations, and even then, the location was still random. His thoughts were interrupted as they reached the staircase leading up to the second floor. The space was too narrow and could only accommodate Michael and the shaman. So far, they hadn't encountered any issues, but Michael still didn't feel completely safe until he was out of the tower. However, he had little choice in this situation. In the end, he dismissed Lucky and Prince into the netherworld while summoning 3 male orcs with undead summoning to guard him. After ascending the stairs to the second floor, the space finally opened up again, and Michael immediately summoned Lucky and Prince back, dismissing the orcs aside from the orc shaman. Only when Lucky and Prince were by his side again did Michael feel safer and more confident. He took a moment to observe his surroundings, and the sight before him took his breath away. While the first floor had been about creation, this level seemed focused on assembly. On these slabs lay gargoyle bodies, half-formed, with limbs missing, their stone surfaces glistening faintly under the shaman's fire. Each piece was incomplete. Some of the gargoyles had their heads, but others were missing limbs. "They didn't complete them," Michael whispered, his voice tinged with realization. They were assembling, but something interrupted the process, or someone. Chapter 93, Close to Death. Michael felt a chill at the thought and couldn't help but glance nervously at his surroundings. However, just like before, it was silent. The only noises came from him and his undead companions. "Something still doesn't make sense," Michael muttered. "Looking at the dorm I came from, it's clear this ruin had plenty of residents in the past. So how could they leave such a valuable tower untouched? Unless..." His voice trailed off, and a sinking feeling gripped him. Unless they never left. Michael's heart thudded heavily in his chest. Am I just scaring myself? Michael tried to push the thought away, but suddenly, a sound broke the silence. At first, it was faint, almost imperceptible, but it grew louder. "Food? I smell food." The voice was unnerving, belonging to no specific gender or age, and distorted as though multiple people were speaking in unison. Each word was out of sync, creating a disjointed and eerie resonance. The unsettling impression of the voice sent shivers down Michael's spine, but before he could react, a sharp, excruciating pain tore through his head. He screamed, clutching his head as the pain overwhelmed him. His undead immediately froze, their alert postures revealing their readiness to defend him. But Michael realized something. They couldn't hear anything. The voice continued, its words clawing at his sanity. "See come, see come." With each repetition, the pain in Michael's head worsened. It felt like jagged knives slicing through his mind. His vision blurred, and his knees buckled as he fought to remain conscious. "If I pass out, something bad will happen. Very bad." His instincts screamed that giving in wasn't an option. As if to confirm his fears, a familiar system panel flashed before his eyes, its usual blue glow replaced by an ominous, blood-red hue. Despite the pain, Michael managed to make out the messages. "Chosen One is in danger. Chosen One is in danger. Danger detected to be capable of causing real death. Danger detected to be capable of causing real death. Chosen mental fortitude isn't strong enough to resist influence. It is advised to commit suicide by your own hands. It is advised to commit suicide by your own hands." For the first time since his awakening, the system's panels showed something beyond their usual. An unmistakable warning of true death. Death. The word echoed in his mind, cold and final. Through his connection with his undead, Michael sensed their unease. Their confusion was evident. They gathered around him protectively. But no, this wasn't what they should be doing. Protecting him wasn't enough. He needed to escape. He needed to get out of here. Michael gritted his teeth, summoning every ounce of strength he had left. With his mind teetering on the edge of oblivion, Michael forced his lips to move. And with a trembling voice, he managed to utter a single word. Kill. He wanted to say more. Kill me, to free himself from the excruciating torment. But the last word refused to come out as his strength failed. His vision dimmed, and the pain threatened to pull him under completely. But fate seemed to intervene. The moment his voice faltered, Michael's blurry gaze caught movement from above. A jet-black tentacle snaked its way down rapidly from the third floor, its inky presence exuding malice. It moved with an otherworldly swiftness, and its target was clear. Him. But it had chosen the wrong moment. Kill. Michael's voice dropped as the tentacle lunged closer. To his undead, the word was absolute, a command etched into their very cores. And with no further clarification, there was only one logical target. The tentacle. It had to be what their master meant. Kill. The command echoed in their souls, resonating with a shaky, otherworldly vibration. It carried something not of theirs. Pain. Not their own pain, but their master's. Madness gripped them, not their own but his. And most disturbingly, the oppressive shadow of death filled them, one that was entirely foreign. It was a feeling that none of them could comprehend fully, but it overwhelmed their growing intelligence and rationality. They went berserk. Suddenly, a loud howl pierced the air, one so deep and soul-shaking it seemed to reverberate through the very essence of a person. The entire tower trembled violently, the ground cracking beneath their feet. Thick, twisted vines erupted from the second floor, lashing out like serpents toward the black tentacle. The two forces collided with a tremendous force, entangling in a fierce, unrelenting struggle. The tentacle was powerful, but it was only one. Lucky, on the other hand, had numerous. Thick vines spiraled around the tentacle, pulling with immense strength. A horrifying scream echoed from the second floor, a sound filled with raw pain, twisting in the air like a dying animal. Kill. I'll kill you. The voice. No. The voices sounded as deranged as ever, their tones split and discordant. Clearly, the tentacle felt the full force of the vines, its form writhing in agony. And it was this pain that triggered a sudden shift. Chosen is no longer under influence. Chosen is temporarily safe. Chosen is no longer under influence. Chosen is temporarily safe. Michael's mind cleared. The blinding pain that had consumed his mind faded away, leaving only a dull, throbbing headache. His thoughts were no longer clouded, but he knew this reprieve was fleeting. He didn't need the system panel to tell him. The danger wasn't over. Michael took a quick glance. Fuck. He witnessed something that chilled him to his core. Without hesitation, he barked a command to the orc shaman beside him. Stop that damn huge fireball above your head. We need to get out of here. Now, with the order given, he swiftly leaped onto the back of the orc shaman, who had already started to cancel the fireball she'd intended to hurl at the tentacle. She was confused, but she obeyed her master's command. Strength surged through her legs as she bolted toward the stairs leading to the first floor, disappearing in an instant. A second later, they were outside the tower. Michael's heart raced as he screamed, "What are you stopping for?" Turning quickly, he issued a command to the other undead, all of them, except Lucky and Prince. "Drop whatever you're holding and follow me." Pointing to a direction in the dense forest beyond the ruins, Michael urged the orc shaman forward. The pair, along with the other undead, took off in a blur, racing into the safety of the woods. The moment they fled, thick vines erupted from the ground, surrounding the black tower in a frenzy. Michael didn't dare look back, but he couldn't forget what he had seen when he'd used his skill on the tentacle after regaining his senses. Corrupted? Rank, extraordinary. Chapter 94 Escaped. Never treat the land of origin like a game. It was a phrase Michael had seen countless times on the forums. It was also a mantra he'd repeated to himself after nearly losing his life to an acid slime just a few days ago. Never treat the land of origin like a game. But only now was Michael beginning to grasp its true meaning. The land of origin, at the end of the day, wasn't just a game or a simulation. It was as real as the world he had come from. I almost died, Michael murmured, the words heavy on his lips. The thought still felt surreal. The reality of it lingered in his mind like a stubborn shadow, filling him with a deep, gnawing insecurity he had never felt before. Yet as much as that realization rattled him, Michael knew there were more immediate concerns to address. Undead summoning. Michael stretched out both his hands, and two greenish magic circles appeared before him. From them emerged his two most powerful undead, Lucky and Prince. However, both were in terrible condition. Lucky's left eye had been blinded, and dark green, corrosive blood dripped to the ground, eating away at the soil. Its entire body was covered in deep scars, each leaking the same blood. Prince, though in better shape, had lost its tail and bore several less severe wounds. It was clear that Lucky had taken the brunt of the battle. Thankfully, neither had perished, but they were in no condition to be used effectively in combat until they healed. Unfortunately, this presented a significant problem. Unlike living creatures, undead didn't heal naturally, even if they retained certain traits from their past lives. Some undead could heal, but only to a limited extent. For example, Lucky and Prince's bleeding would eventually stop, but that was as far as natural recovery due to still having flesh would take them. If they were skeletal undead, healing that type would be more complicated. Certain types of undead could also consume flesh to convert it into energy for regeneration. There were also necromancer spells specifically designed to aid in their recovery. But for now, the only option Michael had to help his injured undead was to provide them with fresh flesh to consume. Michael felt a pang of guilt for leaving Lucky and Prince behind to stall for time. But it had been a choice of survival. Either he escaped, or all of them would perish. At least by retreating, he could summon them back before it was too late. As for them defeating that creature, it was impossible. The creature was a 3-star extraordinary rank, 2 stars above Lucky, and an entire major rank above Prince. It was also at least 20 levels beyond Michael, evident from his inability to glean substantial information about it. Such a being could obliterate them all in a single strike. Michael suspected the only reason they were still alive was because the creature appeared weakened, likely having just awakened. From its behavior, directly targeting him and calling him food, Michael realized that had he been caught, he'd have been used as a supplement for its recovery. It wouldn't have been a simple matter of nourishment either. Based on the panel reaction, his death would have been certain. As for why it ignored his undead, the answer was probably simple. The only part of an undead that could be considered alive was their souls, and even those were abstract. I think I'm starting to piece this together, Michael muttered. The ruins' eerie silence, coupled with the complete absence of people, made him suspect that the creature was responsible for the devastation. The tower, with its intricate design and focus on advanced weapon research and creation, suggested that its former inhabitants were likely the ones who created the monster. Recalling the creature's chilling, multi-layered voice, Michael felt his suspicions solidify. The extravagance of the tower, its advanced constructs like the gargoyles made from precious materials, all pointed to the immense capabilities of its creators. But perhaps they had overreached, creating something far beyond their control. It seemed they had paid the ultimate price. It's still not safe here. We need to move, Michael said firmly. Though his body ached from the creature's mental assault and the strain of using a massive amount of mana to summon Lucky and Prince over such a great distance, he couldn't let himself rest. Michael wanted to put as much distance as possible between himself and the ruins, even though he had already fled a significant way. Every instinct told him he needed to keep going. Michael dismissed Lucky and Prince back to the netherworld, their battered forms vanishing into greenish smoke. Climbing onto its back, he signaled his remaining undead to follow, and together they continued their journey through the dense woods. As their figures flashed through the trees in a blur, Michael's mind burned with a mix of fury and determination. Sooner or later, just you wait. I'll kill you. After running for a while, the tall, oppressive trees began to thin, gradually giving way to open grasslands. When Michael finally emerged from the forest, he spotted something in the distance that brought a small smile to his face. A massive wall standing proud a few hundred meters away, with people passing through its gates. Civilization, finally. However, Michael didn't rush toward the wall. He hesitated, glancing at himself and his undead. They were far from presentable. His clothes were tattered, his body showed signs of exhaustion, and his undead companions looked anything but welcoming. Even if he were alone, he wouldn't dare approach the gates in such a state. With a contemplative frown, he turned back toward the forest. It's not the right time to head there. I need to prepare first. Besides, it's probably past noon in the real world by now. I should return and check on things. As Michael and his undead retreated into the cover of the trees, his thoughts drifted to the materials stored in his spatial storage. Chapter 95. Back at the Supers Association. Last day of the year, y'all. I'm so happy we made it here together. Starting tomorrow, I'll be releasing 3 chapters daily and 4 chapters on weekends. For every 50 golden tickets, GT, I'll drop an extra chapter, and for every 100 Power Stones, PS, you'll get another bonus chapter. Happy New Year in advance, everyone. Stay blessed, and I hope you enjoy today's chapter. In the end, the only thing Michael had been able to take from the ruin was the remains of the gargoyles he had killed. While it wasn't a small amount, compared to the materials he had seen before the appearance of that thing, it felt painfully inadequate. Michael knew the materials in his possession were likely worth a fortune, possibly rivaling his highest earnings yet. But the more, the merrier, right? Despite the missed opportunities, he was just grateful to be alive. Part of the reason he had managed to react under the creature's mental influence was his vigilance. If he had let greed cloud his judgment, he might have died before Lucky and Prince could even respond. The system messages had been clear. Staying under the creature's influence would have killed him. The tentacle was only a topping. I can only hope that thing doesn't leave its location, Michael muttered, a gnawing sense of guilt creeping into his thoughts. It felt as though he had unleashed some kind of abomination that could soon bring destruction. The very idea weighed heavily on his conscience. The ruined situation can't be left unchecked for too long, he reasoned. That monster shouldn't be rank 3, otherwise, I'd have died instantly. It's probably still rank 2, which aligns perfectly with my current goals. The thought gave Michael a new sense of urgency. He needed to grow stronger and fast. That resolve, however, wasn't entirely selfless. Michael still had his eyes on the tower itself and its content. Now that his panic had subsided, the treasures within the tower had once again captured his imagination. After wandering through the forest for some time, Michael came across a secluded area with a cave that appeared untouched for years. Deciding it was a good spot for a temporary base, he settled there for the time being. Feeling uneasy about leaving Lucky and Prince in the netherworld given their injuries, and perhaps succumbing to paranoia, Michael decided to keep them with his body. Lucky, too large to rest inside the cave, stayed outside with the other undead that couldn't enter the netherworld. As for whether he'd need them in the real world, Michael decided to take a calculated risk. In any case, he was about to receive another 20 evolution points, which, combined with his current 15, would be more than enough to create another level 18 undead at 3-star rare rank. Leaving behind the corpses he had originally planned to sell for Lucky and Prince to consume, Michael returned his consciousness to his original body. A moment later, Michael opened his eyes to the slightly familiar ceiling of his hotel room. He didn't get up immediately and instead continued lying on the bed. I should visit home soon. I miss Aunt Mia, he muttered. Lily, too. The words slipped out before he even realized it. On the surface, he seemed fine, but his mind was still shaken by his near-death experience. In that moment of fear, the faces of the 2 people closest to him had surfaced in his thoughts. Much of his current composure, which allowed him to stay put instead of rushing to be with them, was because most of those feelings stemmed from the original owner of this body rather than the transmigrator, Michael. Though the 2 were now one entity, their integration was more of a harmonized balance than perfect unity. Slowly but surely, however, Michael was becoming whole. After a while, he finally sat up on the bed. As he moved, he noticed the sheets beneath him were damp with dried sweat, leaving behind a mess that hinted at just how much he had perspired. The room was cold, which made it clear that even in this controlled environment, his body had reacted to the experience in the land of origin. A dimension away, and yet my body here felt it too, the feeling of death, he murmured, a wary smile tugging at his lips. He stood still for a moment, collecting himself, before walking over to the table to grab his phone. 12:23 p.m. Due to advancing to rank 1, this recent visit was the longest he had ever spent in the land of origin. And with civilization now within reach there, Michael realized his time in the real world might soon begin to dwindle. Of course, if the land of origin couldn't provide the experience points he needed, he would have to shift his focus back to the real world, no matter how much the other dimension tempted him. At the very least, if he gained stable access to dimensional cracks, he might still make it in time for the academy exams. He recalled reading on the forums that Awakener academies typically held their entrance exams around the same time as cultivation academies, though the venues were different. It was said that, a week after the awakening ceremony, Awakeners and third-year students would be summoned and informed about the supernatural academies. It was Sunday now, which meant Michael should expect the summon from his school soon. Subconsciously, he realized 4 days had already passed since his awakening. Dropping his phone, Michael moved to get dressed for the day. Aside from checking the value of the materials he had brought back from the ruins, he also needed to buy clothes for his humanoid undead to cover their nakedness. However, his first priority was the Supers Association. It didn't take Michael long to get ready. Much to his satisfaction, he hadn't destroyed anything in the hotel, a clear sign that his control over his body was back. However, he couldn't ignore the subtle behavior of the people around him. They seemed reluctant to stand close to him for long. At first, he dismissed it as coincidence, but the pattern became more apparent as he made his way through the city. When he checked himself in the hotel bathroom mirror earlier, he hadn't noticed anything unusual, aside from his physique looking slightly more muscular and defined. It wasn't until he arrived at the Supers Association and stood in front of Grace, his usual receptionist, that he finally understood what was going on. "I need to suppress my aura?" Michael repeated the words Grace had said the moment she saw him. Though confused, he could roughly understand what she meant by aura. It was probably his power leaking out unconsciously. But the real question was how. How was he supposed to suppress something he couldn't even see? "It seems you've just advanced," Grace began, her voice calm, yet carrying a subtle undertone of curiosity. "Your mana is quite impressive," she added. What Grace didn't mention, however, was just how impressive. Michael's mana was strong enough that she, a mid-stage rank 3 cultivator, had to take him extremely seriously. The mana she could sense radiating from Michael was just that impressive. While she had encountered newly advanced rank 1 awakeners with immense mana levels before, Michael's rapid progression was notable. Reaching rank 1 just 4 days after awakening was rare, even for the most gifted. "My mana," Michael muttered, confused. "Is it my mana I have to suppress?" "Yes," Grace confirmed before elaborating. "Your mana seems to have increased by a very significant amount. Though you think you have it under control, to supernaturals like us, it's almost like you're announcing your presence. Your control is still impressive, though. Ordinary people mostly feel uncomfortable around you rather than outright fainting." Michael nodded, slowly piecing things together. He remembered reading that at a certain point, mana could start influencing the surroundings even without any intentional effort from the caster. Of course, he wasn't anywhere near that level yet. Right now, his mana was simply leaking slightly, enough to make ordinary humans uncomfortable due to their lack of exposure to such a high concentration. Knowing the root of the problem made things a bit clearer for Michael, but as a novice in magic, actually fixing the issue was easier said than done. Still, it was a relief to know his condition wasn't considered a major issue within the Supers Association. He could take his time to work on it. Soon, Michael shifted focus to the reason for his visit. "Were you able to secure any entries into cracks for me, Miss Grace?" he asked. "Name, Michael Norman. Class, Adept Necromancer. Level, 15. Strength, 30.4. Agility, 41.1. Constitution, 31.7. Intelligence, 110.1. Attribute points, 30. Skills, Undead Summoning, Undead Revival, Detect, Basic Shot, Share Senses, Spearmanship, Acid Shot, Bone Spear, Slow Curse, Bone Armor, Corpse Explosion. Talent, Infinite Evolution. Class Skill, Contract Slot, 20/40. Gift, Mark of Origin. Venomthorn Ravager LV, 25, Max. Name, Lucky. EXP, 805,990/1,021,752. Rank, Extraordinary. Skills: Bite, Plant Control, Advanced Mastery. Poison, Advanced Mastery. Viral Growth, Basic Mastery. Toxic Resurgence, Basic Mastery. Master, Michael Norman. Undead Redthorn LV, 25, Max. Name, Prince. EXP, 238,677/1,021,752. Rank, Rare. Skills: Bite, Plant Control, Intermediate Mastery. Poison, Basic Mastery. Master, Michael Norman. Chapter 96, Potential Profit. The day before, Michael had requested Grace to apply for entries into the Dimensional Cracks in Woodstone City. This time, his requirement was straightforward. He wanted to enter the cracks solo. The association had no restrictions against supernaturals applying to cracks within their membership access, regardless of the applicant's registered strength. The only stipulation was that an individual could not apply for multiple entries into the same crack in one day to avoid causing complications that could increase the difficulty for the next cleanup team. However, special cracks, such as those inhabited by other civilizations, came with stricter requirements and regulations. Michael had no business with such specialized cracks at the moment. Corrupted-type cracks still held more value to him than anything else. "I did manage to secure you access to a few entries," Grace said, her fingers moving swiftly over her keyboard. "However, since you requested solo applications, which is basically the same as an entire team applying, the entries are rather spaced out." Michael nodded at her explanation. As for the spaced-out entries, he didn't mind as long as he had them. "What days are they?" he asked. "Give me a moment," Grace replied, her focus on her system. Michael assumed she was pulling up his file, and sure enough, it didn't take long for her to respond. "Your application was approved for all three-dimensional cracks in Woodstone City: the Level 1 Goblin World crack, the Level 1 Forest Domain crack, and the Level 2 Ape Region crack," Grace explained before pausing for a moment. A second later, she continued, "Unfortunately, you don't have any entries today. Your first one is tomorrow at noon in the Forest Domain crack. After that, you have 6 more entries spaced out over the next 2 weeks. An email with the full schedule will be sent to you after we confirm your intention to proceed with these cracks." Michael wanted to ask why the duration was limited to 2 weeks, but held himself back, forming his own conclusions. Given how quickly cracks were generated, Michael doubted there was a shortage of entries. A Level 1 crack could be cleared at least 3 times daily. Over 2 weeks, that amounted to 42 entries per crack. Considering Woodstone City had 2 Level 1 cracks, that was nearly 100 available slots over the same period. However, Michael wasn't the only supernatural in the city, so it made sense that access wouldn't be unlimited. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that 7 entries in 2 weeks was quite generous. If he cleared only Level 1 cracks, he was looking at a guaranteed $700,000. For the current Michael, that was still a significant amount. Factoring in if he had access to the Level 2 Ape Region crack, he estimated he could make over $2 million in the next 2 weeks. This estimation was confirmed after Michael and Grace finalized a few details back and forth. "Are we okay with this, Mr. Norman?" Grace asked for confirmation. "Yes," Michael replied with a smile. He wasn't sure if he was just lucky or if Grace had gone out of her way to help, but among the 7 entries he secured, 2 were for the Level 2 Ape Region Dimensional crack. Based on his previous experience in that crack, earning at least $1 million per entry was practically guaranteed. 2 entries meant $2 million at the very least, and when combined with the profits from the other 5 Level 1 cracks, Michael was looking at a potential income of $3 million or more. This was a substantial amount and would allow him to do a lot of things. For one, he could finally afford proper clothing for his undead, no more nakedness, and even equip them with high-quality gear. He could also get himself better equipment while still having plenty left over for other needs. "Maybe I can check the trade center for something that guarantees evolution points, regardless of star rating," Michael mused as he left Grace's counter. "If I can find something like that and buy in bulk, it'd save me a lot of trouble. It'd be even better if it's available in the forum store. It'd make things so much more convenient." Lost in thought, Michael began daydreaming about his plans as he headed toward the trade center. Now that his entries into dimensional cracks were settled, it was time to address his other business for the day: selling off the materials he looted from the gargoyles. Compared to the guaranteed profits from the cracks, Michael was even more excited about this venture. Something told him he was about to make a major profit. If the materials could earn him at least as much as his future dimensional crack entries, Michael would have more flexibility in how he spent his money. This was especially true since his undead numbers would increase after using the corpses he'd obtained from the cracks. As these thoughts ran through his mind, Michael arrived at the trade center. However, instead of encountering Brian, the familiar face he expected, he saw the same middle-aged substitute from before. Though slightly surprised, Michael wasn't particularly bothered about conducting business with this man. Since he wasn't purchasing something like Source Liquid, where the star rating determined whether he'd earn evolution points, there was little difference in dealing with the substitute or Brian. Of course, a familiar face was always more reassuring. "Good afternoon," Michael greeted as he approached the counter, initiating the conversation. "Good afternoon. What can I do for you today?" The cheerful stand-in for Brian responded with a friendly smile. "I'd like to sell something." Michael got straight to the point. "What are you selling?" "Some materials." "Materials? What kind of materials?" Michael paused for a moment, recalling the names of the materials he had looted from the gargoyles. He began listing them one by one, but as he continued, he noticed something odd. The more he spoke, the deeper the look of confusion grew on the middle-aged man's face. Chapter 97. Miss Priscilla. "Is something the matter?" Michael couldn't help but ask as he finished listing the names of the materials he had. The middle-aged man behind the counter chuckled awkwardly. "No, nothing's wrong. It's just, I don't recognize any of the names you just mentioned." Michael's face fell, and a flicker of anxiety surged through him. "Does this mean I won't be able to sell these materials here?" He thought nervously. He wasn't worried about their value. How could materials used to construct monsters capable of going head-to-head with extraordinary ranked creatures be worthless? That was impossible. But the thought of not being able to sell them in this city was troubling. It makes sense, though, Michael reasoned. The Super Association branch here wasn't exactly a hub of resources. From his daily browsing on the forums, though he hadn't had time to check his phone today, Michael knew Woodstone City was relatively backward compared to other cities even in the supernatural realm. Its resources and infrastructure lagged behind. This was reflected in the city's lack of dimensional cracks, only 3, all low-leveled. After all, 2 level 2 corrupted type cracks could easily outweigh 5 level 1 corrupted type cracks in terms of resource potential. Will I have to travel to another city to sell these materials? Michael's thoughts began to spiral. But before his concerns could grow further, the middle-aged man spoke again, and his next words brought a wave of relief. "Though I don't recognize the materials you mentioned, it doesn't mean we don't have someone here who will. So, don't worry about not being able to sell anything." The middle-aged man reassured him with a smile. Michael muttered, "Oh," feeling a little embarrassed. He realized he had likely worn his thoughts on his face. The man continued speaking, his tone light and professional. "Based on what you said, I assume these materials are quite a lot and probably unique, right?" Michael nodded in confirmation. "All right then, please follow me through this door," the man said, pointing to an entrance Michael had taken several times to meet with Brian. He had also taken this path with the middle-aged man before too, when he brought monster corpses the last time. However, from the man's tone, it didn't feel like he was giving directions to a stranger or newcomer, but rather following procedure out of habit. Michael didn't think too deeply about it, and followed the middle-aged man. They walked through a familiar corridor lined with doors until they reached a location Michael was familiar with. It was the underground storage space where he had made his first $100,000 from dimensional monster materials. "I'll bring someone who can likely identify what you want to sell. In the meantime, you can use this time to bring out the materials." This wasn't their first trade, so the middle-aged man knew Michael's status as an awakener and his storage space. After saying what he has to say, with that, the man left. Since Michael was already familiar with the space, he felt no discomfort staying there alone. After a quick glance around the wide area, he began pulling out the remains of the gargoyles one by one, carefully arranging them according to their material type. As he worked, Michael also made sure to keep his mana from leaking, just as he'd been doing since leaving Grace's counter. Unfortunately, the middle-aged man earlier hadn't shown any reaction regarding his aura, so Michael still wasn't sure if he was doing it correctly. While arranging the gargoyle remains, he used Detect, on them again to confirm their information. Obsidian Forge Alloy. A blend of dark metals and obsidian-like minerals, offering a stone-like texture combined with flexibility and high durability. Commonly used for constructing durable constructs or golems. Vein Shard. A lightweight yet durable fragment with blue-green veins, often used to craft mana-conductive tools. Feather Plate. Flexible, metallic plates as light as feathers, ideal for creating aerodynamic constructs. Core Stone. Dense, black material prized for its ability to store and stabilize mana. Crystal Sphere. A smooth, patterned stone utilized in crafting energy detectors and amplifiers. Aetherstone. A pale, translucent stone with anti-gravitational properties, frequently used in levitation devices. Rune Core. An irregular core marked by glowing runes, functioning as a power source for advanced machinery. They should be worth a lot, right? Michael thought, feeling a mix of anxiety and anticipation. A few minutes later, the middle-aged man returned, this time accompanied by a middle-aged woman wearing glasses and dressed in blue robes. Robes weren't a popular style, even in this world, making her stand out even more. And then there were the glasses. Can supernaturals have bad eyesight? Michael thought, finding it slightly ironic. He didn't have much time to dwell on the idea, though, as the woman suddenly appeared in front of him, or rather, in front of the materials he had laid out. "Is this obsidian forge alloy?" a soft voice echoed. The woman spoke calmly but with undeniable authority. Yes. Michael stammered, caught off guard by her sudden question and presence. He answered absent-mindedly, still processing her unexpected movements. However, it didn't seem like she was paying attention to him, though. Instead, her focus remained entirely on the scattered materials in front of her as she began to speak. This is quite a rare material, and it was created exceptionally well. However, it doesn't seem to have been made using the Federation method, yet it retains, if not surpasses, the same level of quality. It's uniquely crafted. Michael was stunned by her observations. How much can she infer in such a short time? He wondered, impressed though he understood only a part of what she said. Noticing his confusion, the middle-aged man who had gotten closer leaned in slightly and whispered, "Miss Priscilla is a magic crafter and an exceptionally knowledgeable expert in magic in general." Though Michael had already suspected that the woman was a cultivator, her quick recognition of the materials almost made him think she might be an awakener for a moment. Her insight seemed uncanny. The man's explanation prompted another thought. Michael glanced at her again, this time more curious. "She's a mage?" Chapter 98 Big Prices. Among the two cultivation systems in Aurora, Michael was far more familiar with the knight system than the mage system. In fact, this was the case for most locals, to the extent that the term cultivator almost felt exclusively associated with knights. This might be due to the fact that the majority of people practiced the knight cultivation system. According to Michael's knowledge, a mage was someone who possessed the talent to be an excellent knight, a prodigy even. In a way, one could say every apprentice mage had the potential to be an exceptional knight. However, this was a threshold few could ever hope to reach. The original Michael, for example, would have been lucky to successfully light up a life seed before his death, a level of talent that wasn't particularly rare in the general population. Only individuals like Brian had the exceptional ability to become mages, which was ironic considering he somehow awakened the two most popular professions in Aurora. This highlighted how rare mages truly were. The rarity extended into the awakening system as well. The knight class was common grade, while any mage-related class was considered at least rare. Awakeners could also cultivate, and it wasn't that Michael didn't want to try his hand at cultivation now that he was an awakener. It was just that he lacked the time for such slow and steady progress. Miss Priscilla was the first mage Michael had ever seen, and he was understandably curious about her. However, his curiosity was fleeting. Her significance to him didn't come close to the value of the money his materials could fetch. She had said they were valuable, and that alone made Michael all the more expectant. Michael watched as Priscilla examined the rest of the materials, correctly identifying each one. He was both impressed and anxious, waiting patiently as she worked. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she turned her attention to him. "These materials of yours are quite valuable, but due to how you handled them, Their price will have to be adjusted downward slightly, Priscilla explained. Michael listened in silence, understanding her reasoning. There was little he could do about the state of the materials. Killing the gargoyles cleanly wasn't an option. Unlike the goblins or black apes, overpowering them outright had been impossible. The wingless gargoyle was okay, but when he fought the other two, preserving their bodies had been the last thing on his mind. Priscilla, too, seemed to understand this. She knew that perfectly preserving monster corpses was a skill for the powerful, and the quality of these materials indicated the young man in front of her was no pushover. The remnants of the gargoyles alone, combined with the quality of the materials and faint traces of technology, suggested that the creatures had been formidable golems. All of this left her with a high impression of Michael, despite knowing he was an awakener, information she had gleaned from the middle-aged man beside her. What she didn't realize, however, was just how extraordinary Michael truly was. He wasn't an old awakener like she subconsciously assumed, but a mere 4-day-old necromancer with the equivalent power of an early-stage rank 4 cultivator. After addressing the state of the materials, Priscilla got straight to business. I'll start by stating the price I'm offering for your materials. First off, let's start with the lowest, which are the Etherstone and the Runed Core, she said. Michael's ears perked up at that, and he began listening attentively. She said the lowest first. From those prices, Michael could gauge how big the sale would be by the end. The Runed Core is partially damaged and will most likely be used as a research item that gets repurposed. As for the Etherstone, though rare, there are alternatives that serve the same function, even if they're not as durable. For the Runed Core, I'll offer you $450,000. Had it been in better condition, it could have fetched around $600,000. As for the Etherstone, I'll offer $700,000 each. Since there are two, that totals $1.4 million. Together, everything comes to $1,850,000. Do you have any objections? Priscilla's calm tone made it clear she was prepared for Michael to raise concerns about the price. Was he going to? No. With a neutral expression, Michael responded, No, no problem. Though his tone was calm, his insides were anything but. Almost 2 million. Almost 2 million. Almost 2 million. Michael wanted to scream, but managed to hold it in, keeping a poker face. Although he had anticipated that the gargoyle remains would be valuable, Michael was still surprised, thrilled, even, and his excitement grew as he thought about the next items. The next material Priscilla moved on to was the vein shards, which resembled short wires about the thickness of a baby's finger. In the end, they counted 33 pieces. Priscilla spoke again, her tone steady and professional. Once again, we're dealing with technology different from ours. However, these shards can be repurposed easily without much processing while also serving as valuable research items. The way she spoke gave Michael the impression that she was an honest woman, which made him trust her just a little more. It definitely wasn't because she was throwing out big numbers. For the shards, I'll offer $65,000 each. What do you think? Michael wasn't thinking, at least not about negotiating. No, he was thinking about $65,000 times 33. The current Michael had no choice but to be a trusting customer. A small part of him regretted not checking the forums to get an estimate of the prices, but even now, the urge to grab his phone and look things up didn't surface. For some reason, his brush with death had made him want to be more in tune with life, at least for a little while. That, and he didn't believe an association staff member would scam him too heavily. At most, they might take slight advantage of him. Of course, if they did, Michael could only chalk it up to experience. However, he promised himself that after this, he would always come prepared, just like Mira had when she sold the black ape corpses, ensuring she wasn't taken advantage of by the old female supervisor. Chapter 99: Purchasing Weapons. Michael stared at his account balance in a daze as he slowly made his way out of the trade center. Your account balance is $16,803,543. $16 million. That was the total amount he'd earned from selling the remains of the gargoyles. How did Michael feel? Scared. The sheer amount of money momentarily frightened him. But after the fear came a short burst of greed. Greed for what? It was simple, the Black Tower. Michael couldn't even count how many gargoyle remains he'd seen back in that place, especially on the second floor. And that wasn't even including the tower itself, which was likely worth an astronomical amount to be able to withstand the violent clashes between monsters as strong as Lucky. If just a small part of it earned him this much, how much could the entire structure and its contents be worth? Before, Michael had been cautious, almost reluctant, about returning to the ruins. Now, he was eager to claim them as his own. However, realization left him a little frustrated. To attend an academy, he needed strength. To evolve his undead continuously and ensure he didn't lose control as they grew stronger, he needed strength. And now, to claim a treasure as valuable as the Black Tower, he also needed strength. This one was especially frustrating since, without sufficient power, it wasn't just failure he risked, it was death. Strength. It was the one thing Michael didn't have enough of. Strength and money. Ugh, Michael groaned as his excitement began to wane, bringing him back to reality. Though he would have loved to leave the money untouched in his account for a while longer, nothing in this cursed world ever went according to plan. But there's no way 16 million can finish that fast, right? Now that I have this much, even if I buy better equipment for my undead as they grow stronger, there should still be a lot left, right? When it came to his own growth, Michael couldn't be selfish. But that didn't mean he didn't enjoy the vanity of knowing he had millions in his account. There's no way my talent will lead me to the path of being infinitely broke, right? Michael was unsure, but a part of him whispered that it might. Maybe not now, but definitely later. Remembering he needed to get equipment for his orcs, Michael retraced his steps back to the trade center. You want to buy some weapons? The middle-aged man at the counter, surprised by Michael's return, asked to confirm. Yes. And you want them big and heavy? The man couldn't help but glance at Michael's slender frame as he said this, his gaze filled with slight doubt. Big and heavy for supernaturals like them was like a mountain for ordinary humans. It definitely wasn't going to be simple. Michael's eye twitched when he noticed. The man didn't need to speak for Michael to guess what he was thinking. The weapons aren't for me, Michael clarified, though he immediately felt he might have said too much. Wasn't he just confirming he wasn't as strong as he looked? Oh, the middle-aged man said, thankfully not commenting further on Michael's choice of purchase. Soon, Michael was led to yet another door. Along the way, he was tempted to ask how big the association really was. From the outside, it already looked massive, but inside, it seemed even larger. It was honestly bigger than it looked. The equipment room was spacious, though not as vast as the underground areas he'd seen earlier. It housed several compartments filled with categorized weapons. However, Michael couldn't help but feel that if he wanted to arm all of his undead, the equipment in the room might not suffice. Still, he didn't comment on this. He assumed the association had its own ways of managing inventory. Though unsure about the exact number of supernaturals in Woodstone City, Michael guessed it must be substantial. Even with another Supers Association branch in the city, the demand for weapons had to be significant. Still, Michael kept his thoughts to himself. If the time ever came when he needed to buy equipment in bulk, he'd learn how the association handled such supplies. The association's forum store also sold weapons, ranging from mundane to special, but purchasing in bulk was tricky. This was one reason Michael hadn't considered using it to arm his undead. After allowing Michael a moment to take in the equipment room, the middle-aged man from the trade center finally spoke. So, what type of weapon are you looking for? Swords, spears, halberds, hammers, and so on. Name them, and if we have them, I'll take you to see the models. Michael caught a keyword. Models. However, now wasn't the time to dwell on it. He turned his attention to deciding which weapons would suit his undead. Among his humanoid undead, Michael decided he didn't need to arm the female orcs or the wolves. The former were mages who didn't rely on physical weapons, though a wand or staff might suit them. The latter, the wolves, didn't seem to require any equipment at the moment. With 5 female orcs and 3 undead wolves out of the equation, Michael was left with 12 undead to equip. 10 male orcs and 2 blue apes. All of them were strength-based creatures. Michael deliberated for a few seconds before coming to a decision. Broadswords, axes, and hammers. All of them should be large and heavy, he stated firmly. The middle-aged man nodded, though he was curious about Michael's insistence on such oversized weapons. He could sense that Michael wasn't weak and could likely wield heavy weapons himself. However, size mattered. Too large a weapon could hinder combat ability, especially if the wielder wasn't adept at using it. Still, it wasn't the man's place to question. The boy had also stated the weapons were for someone else to use too. What his customers bought weren't his business most of the time. Please follow me, the man said after confirming Michael's choice. Chapter 100 Hammers. Michael was led to a section of the room dedicated to hammer-like weapons. He noticed a variety of them, differing in size and appearance, some large, some small, some shiny, others dull. At first glance, what stood out was the expensive aura that seemed to radiate from their very cores. Michael quickly bypassed the smaller hammers, his focus narrowing on the massive ones. As he observed them, he began to understand why the middle-aged man had referred to them as models. Though these hammers were clearly the real deal, it seemed that they were more for display than for sale in this particular room. After scanning the options, Michael's eyes eventually settled on 3 of the largest hammers, the only 3 gigantic ones in the compartment. Titan's Wrath. Rank Rare. Type Heavy Warhammer. Creates a powerful shockwave upon impact, stunning enemies and shattering defenses. Ideal for breaking through fortified armor and barriers. Frostcaller's Maul. Rank Rare. Type Ice Hammer. Releases a chilling blast with each strike, slowing enemies and weakening their defenses. Particularly effective against fast or evasive opponents. Bonebreaker. Rank Rare. Type Reinforced Warhammer. Delivers devastating physical blows, with a chance to temporarily cripple an enemy's movement or attack power. Highly effective against larger, brute-type foes. From the brief descriptions alone, it was clear that these weapons were far superior to common rank ones like Michael's broken spear. Comparing the two felt almost insulting. Michael's spear, built with just better synthetic metals, paled in comparison. The craftsmanship and appearance of the 3 hammers were also leagues ahead. Titan's Wrath was a massive blackened steel warhammer with jagged edges and a crimson gemstone embedded at its center. It was 6 feet long, with a hammerhead nearly 2 feet wide. The weapon looked more like a siege tool than something wielded in battle, suggesting it required immense strength to handle. Its handle was wrapped in dark leather, and faint red runes pulsed with power along its head. The rare materials used in its construction were obvious. Michael imagined hitting another version of himself with this hammer and knew it would hurt. Very, very badly. The thought of his undead male orcs, who had the same strength as him, if not more, especially if they used Berserk, wielding a weapon like this made Michael determined to get a good weapon. He imagined that, when they evolved into 1-star extraordinary rank creatures, the weapon might start to hold them back, but at that early stage of the next rank, this hammer would likely still be useful. Then there was Frostcaller's Maul, a frosty blue hammer with a translucent, ice-like head that constantly emitted a chilling mist. It was 5 feet in length, with a hammerhead roughly the size of a small barrel. The grip was made of silver metal, etched with snowflake patterns, and its head glowed softly in dim light. Michael imagined this hammer would look particularly fitting for his blue apes, at least if one were judging by appearance alone. Lastly, Bonebreaker, a rugged warhammer with a solid, bone-colored head that appeared to be carved from some ancient fossil. It was 5.5 feet long, with a hammerhead shaped like a boulder, nearly 1.5 feet in diameter. The handle was reinforced with dark iron bands, and its surface bore cracks that glowed faintly with an earthy hue. Michael wasn't too sure about buying the Bonebreaker. It seemed particularly lackluster compared to the others, but it did have its merit. It was the true blunt-type weapon among the 3, just what one would expect from a hammer. After seeing the hammers, Michael felt no desire to continue looking for more. These hammers seemed perfectly suited for his undead, and he figured they'd probably prefer smashing things rather than slicing them up. How much are the 3? After making the decision to buy the 3 types of weapons, Michael turned to the middle-aged man from the trade center. The Titan's Wrath is priced at $230,000 each, the Frostcaller's Maul is $265,000 each, and the Bonebreaker is $175,000 each. Are you planning to buy them? And if so, how many? Hearing the prices, Michael silently drew in a sharp breath. The equipment was just as expensive as he'd imagined, but he could still manage it. Even if he bought more in advance, it didn't seem like his $16 million would run out anytime soon. If rare rank weapons are this expensive, extraordinary rank and above must be in the millions, if they're even accessible with money. Whatever. At least it's not that expensive for now. I need to use this money to effectively boost my strength. Evolution points are the fastest way, but I also need to level up to keep up. Unfortunately, money doesn't seem to help with that. At least it can get me equipment and monster corpses to fill my open slots. A disorganized stream of thoughts flashed through Michael's mind as he replied to the middle-aged man, who was straightforward when it came to business. "Do you have any goblin and forest wolf corpses here?" Michael asked, choosing to inquire instead of answering the middle-aged man's previous question directly. Though the middle-aged man from the trade center was confused, he still gave a response. "Yes, we have those corpses here. You can only buy up to 20 of each, though." The first time he had bought corpses, Brian, who had attended to him then, told him they had black ape corpses, but at the time, Michael had known they would be well outside his budget, so he hadn't given it much thought. Now that he had money. Currently, Michael had 20 open slots, and he planned to fill 5 with goblins, 5 with forest wolves, and 5 with black apes. As for the remaining 5, Michael intended to use them for an experiment. He wanted to see how his undead would react to an ordinary animal or insect. The unique properties of some animals made Michael very willing to experiment, even with the risk of the pain from severing the connection with any undead he didn't like or if something went wrong. As for asking about the corpses the association could offer, Michael wanted to buy more equipment in advance and make sure he handled everything all at once. Of course, he could have just bought the equipment without asking, but he figured it was better to know what they were doing next after leaving the door. Chapter 101 Armor and More Corpses. After confirming that he could buy even black apes from the association, Michael placed his order for the equipment he wanted. He finally understood why the man from the trade center referred to the weapons as models. Thanks to the middle-aged man's explanation, it became clear. Starting from rare rank, or in cultivation system terms, level 2, items were only semi-stocked. It was like bullets, which could be produced in large quantities because their materials were common and they had many uses. However, rare rank equipment required unique, high-quality materials, specialized craftsmanship, and often had specific functions. As a result, these items couldn't be mass-produced in the same way. Instead, models were displayed to showcase what was available, and orders were made based on demand. They were called semi-stock products because only a limited number were produced periodically, preventing the waste of valuable materials. If the stock finished, then one would have to commission directly from the creators. Michael, planning ahead for the time when he'd reach level 25, the maximum level for rank 1, which he aimed to achieve in Woodstone City, decided to order 8 sets of each hammer for the time being. After some contemplation, he included the Bone Breaker, not because it was his favorite, but because its lack of strong magical presence made it the easiest to repair. Well, according to the middle-aged man from the trade center that was trying to make more sales, a total of 24 hammers brought the cost to a hefty $5,360,000, cutting his remaining funds by a third. Though he felt a pang of pain, Michael knew it was a worthwhile investment. The hammers would last him a long time, and if he ever upgraded, he could resell them, albeit at a lower price, standard for secondhand goods. He knew this because he'd asked the middle-aged man from the trade center, who had responded with a suspicious gaze but explained patiently. After placing the order, the man informed Michael that the association currently had only 4 of each hammer in stock. He assured him that he'd contact the branch in Woodstone City to transfer any remaining stock and, if necessary, place an order from outside the city. As for the models, they were kept on display even when stock ran out, allowing potential buyers to place special orders so they weren't sellable items. Michael was instructed to return tomorrow afternoon for an update. He didn't mind the wait, especially since there were no delivery fees involved. With the hammer issue settled, Michael and the man from the trade center didn't leave the equipment section just yet. After all, what good were weapons without armor? Though his undead were technically dead, they could still die when destroyed. The corpse acted as a container for their souls, which was what kept them alive. If the vessel perished, the soul it housed would also die. Michael wasn't just focused on making them hit harder. He wanted them to be much harder to kill. Unlike the varied types of warhammers he ordered, He opted for the most practical and durable armor he could find. Just like with the previous purchases, Michael also bought 24 sets of armor. Though he was satisfied with his acquisitions, the large sum he had spent in such a short time briefly made him question whether he was making the right choice. However, that doubt was fleeting, as he reminded himself that he was not only keeping his daily evolution point providers safe, but also strengthening them. Speaking of evolution points, Michael had checked his talent section and noticed his points had refreshed and increased to 36. That was enough to upgrade at least 5 1-star common rank undead to 1-star rare rank creatures. Titan's Aegis. Rank rare. Type: heavy defensive armor. Adapts to fit the wearer, providing unparalleled physical defense. Grants moderate regeneration, restoring health gradually over time. The Titan's Aegis was a full set of dark, matte black armor designed for maximum protection and mobility, priced at $320,000. The chest plate was smooth yet heavily reinforced, with raised sections over critical areas such as the chest and abdomen. The pauldrons were angular and compact, offering shoulder protection without limiting arm movement. The gauntlets were sturdy, featuring reinforced knuckles and streamlined forearm guards for both offense and defense. The greaves were equally robust, with overlapping plates shielding the shins and knees while still allowing flexibility for rapid movement. This armor was intended for his male orcs, with one set for himself, as it had size adjustment properties. Michael felt that the blue apes, with their unique limb structure, would be better off without armor. Currently, Michael had 10 male orcs, and fully equipping them would take 10 sets of weapons and armor, leaving 14 sets. These would be divided between his other orcs and blue apes, with only hammers for the latter. To be fair, the equipment he had bought wouldn't be enough to fully equip all his undead, especially since he didn't plan on missing out on acquiring more humanoid undead once he reached max level in rank 1. But for now, it would suffice. The land origin was rumored to be a heaven for leveling up, and Michael had felt that potential at the start. He would have felt it again had the gargoyles not been such tricky monsters. Now that he had found civilization, he hoped it would be easier to find a hotbed for monsters, making his investments worthwhile. After securing the armor, Michael also purchased a new spear. Venomfang Spear. Rank rare. Type: poison spear. Inflicts a potent poison on the target, dealing continuous damage over time and weakening their defenses. The Venomfang Spear featured a sleek, dark green shaft made of reinforced alloy, with veins of glowing emerald running along its length. The spearhead was long and serrated, resembling a fang. Despite its deadly appearance, the spear was lightweight and perfectly balanced as Michael gave it a feel, making it highly effective for both thrusting and throwing. Together with the armor and hammers, Michael had spent up to $13 million in just a short time, leaving him with barely $2.5 million remaining. He was close to being broke again, and this time, it wasn't due to his talents, but simply the mounting expenses. At least there's some sort of improvement. Chapter 102: Leaving the Association. With the purchase of the spear complete, there was nothing else Michael needed from the equipment store, so he followed the middle-aged man from the trade center through yet another door. Another basement? Is the association really that large? This time, Michael couldn't stop himself from blurting it out. Surprisingly, the middle-aged man actually answered. Almost everything around the association building belongs to us, so yes, it's much larger than it appears. But it's nothing compared to the headquarters, the man said with a chuckle before falling silent again. Michael wanted to ask a few more questions, but he didn't get the chance. They had already reached their destination. As Michael suspected, the association had a much larger collection of corpses than what was displayed outside. It wasn't because they were hiding them, but because access to this section required larger purchases or special requests, such as buying a black ape corpse. These couldn't be stored with the goblins or forest wolves due to their size. Additionally, anything outside of sales, most of what was stored here was reserved for the association's internal use. This basement was by far the coldest one Michael had been in since entering the association. It's probably because of the corpses, Michael figured. Compared to the previous storage room Brian had led him to, this area was better organized and equipped with more features. Still, Michael wasn't here to admire the place. He was here for the corpses. So, 20 of each corpse, yes? The middle-aged man asked, smiling. He couldn't help but grin. With everything Michael had bought, as the one in charge of providing the service, he would get a commission. One might assume that just because someone was a supernatural, they were automatically wealthy. That was true for some, but maintaining one's cultivation was expensive, especially if one wanted to keep advancing without stagnating. Most cultivators were broke, or at least broke by supernatural standards. Knowing he'd earn a nice commission from Michael's purchase made the man far more enthusiastic and welcoming. The cut he would get from the millions Michael had just spent would buy him enough resources to cultivate for a while. In the supernatural world, people like Michael weren't typical examples of how money was earned or spent. To be honest, the middle-aged man was starting to think Michael was the son of some senior figure, given how casually he spent without hesitation. Michael, on the other hand, wasn't wasting time. He bought the maximum allowed, 20 corpses of each type. The process took some time, as Michael had to use the land of origin as a storage space again. Fortunately, the area he had marked before leaving the ruins was ideal for setting up a temporary base. The goblins and forest wolves cost $1,000 and $4,000 each, respectively, but the price of the black apes made Michael's eyes twitch. $8,800. Somehow, it feels like the association marks up prices by at least 100% of what they paid for these corpses, Michael thought bitterly. The goblins cost him $20,000 in total, the forest wolves $80,000, and the black apes $176,000, bringing the total to $276,000. Once again, Michael's remaining balance dropped, nearing the $2 million mark. However, the corpses weren't exactly a loss. He could always resell the ones he didn't want later. It was already approaching evening, but Michael planned to quickly fill his contract slots before returning to sell the leftover corpses before it got too dark. Of course, he planned to buy some ordinary creatures on Aurora for experimentation first. After finishing with the corpses, he was led to another room where his purchased equipment was waiting. What happens if another customer comes while you're away? Michael asked, curious. Despite being satisfied with the service, he couldn't help but wonder. Brian had acted the same way, both of them leaving the trade center unattended with no one to replace them. How did they keep business running like this? It's not that serious. If someone comes, I'll know, the man said, pointing at a sleek watch on his wrist. Old customers know what buttons to press outside. Michael wanted to ask more, what buttons? And what about new customers? But decided against it. With one more envious glance from the middle-aged man, Michael used his storage space to transport the equipment he had bought from the association. Oh, I've been meaning to ask, do you have any alternatives to source liquid here? As long as it's just as effective or stronger, I'll take it. Michael finally remembered to ask, hoping he'd get lucky. Unfortunately, no, we don't. But you could try your luck on the forum. Just be careful. The descriptions there can be vague or unclear, so you might end up with something different from what you expect. Ah, I see. Thank you. You're welcome. As for checking the forum, Michael figured he could at a shot, but he wasn't too hopeful. Too many things could go wrong with online purchases, so he preferred buying things in person. At least that way, he could test the product on the spot and decide whether to buy more if it proved useful, unlike online purchases, where things were often a gamble. Sure, he could buy some spirit crystals, but that wasn't the most efficient way to spend his money. It made far more sense to focus on leveling up and increasing the number of his undead, which would grant him more daily evolution points. Perhaps because he understood that after reaching the extraordinary rank, speeding up his progress would require a staggering amount of resources, Michael had learned to be patient and make the best of what he had. And honestly, what he had wasn't bad at all, just slow. It wasn't a bad deal considering that if he could fill all 40 of his contract slots right now, he'd be earning enough daily evolution points to evolve a 1-star extraordinary rank undead every 4 days. That meant an undead at level 25 at the very least. On top of that, Michael was starting to think beyond simply evolving his creatures, thanks to his experiment with Prince. Lucky was now a 1-star extraordinary rank creature, but when Prince evolved to that same rank, he would immediately advance strongly into rank 2 due to his already superior strength before evolution. It was becoming clear that the strength gained from evolving had its limits. Creatures with a higher base strength before evolution would always turn out stronger after it. After collecting the equipment he bought, Michael was finally done with all the buying and selling he had to do at the association. Soon, he made his way out of the building. However, I feel like I'm forgetting something, Michael muttered aloud. Ever since he left Miss Grace's counter, he'd had this nagging feeling that something was missing. However, after thinking hard about what it could be with no progress, he gave up. Michael ordered a ride to the public marketplace in Woodstone City. Sitting in the car with nothing to do, Michael, who was finally feeling the urge to use his phone again, pulled it out, intending to browse the Supers forum. Just as he was about to start, a call came in from an unknown number. Curious, Michael picked up, and a familiar voice greeted him. "Is this Mr. Norman?" "Miss Grace." "Yes, it's me. I apologize if I'm disturbing you, but I wanted to inquire about something, if that's okay." "Please, go ahead. You're not disturbing me." Michael was a little surprised. He hadn't been expecting any calls from the association. While curious about what this was about, he also felt slightly nervous, wondering if something had gone wrong. "Okay, sir. Well, I forgot to ask you when you were here if you'd like me to register your new rank. Since you're still a new supernatural, you're eligible for the benefits program for the gifted, which lasts for 3 years after your initial registration. I'm not sure if you remember, but even if you do, allow me to repeat the information. As a rank 1, if you manage to reach this level within 6 months of your awakening, your monthly benefit will increase. The same applies if you advance to rank 2 of your system within a year. Additionally, though the information increase won't be as significant as becoming a level 2 member, certain things will be more accessible to you on the Supers Association forum. Of course, it's your choice whether you want to register now. If you give me permission, I can complete the registration here without requiring your physical presence." After hearing what Grace had to say, Michael wanted to smack himself on the head. He finally understood what had been bothering him. He hadn't updated his rank. Now that he knew it wasn't anything serious, he relaxed. Without overthinking, he gave her his answer. "Please help me register." "Thank you." "You're welcome, Mr. Norman." With that, the call ended. "I should have asked how much my monthly benefit would increase," Michael muttered to himself. Just because he had some money now didn't mean he was going to disdain free money. A broke man like him had no such right. Chapter 103, Bayon Market. Just as Michael had expected, the store offered plenty of alternatives for source liquids if he needed one. However, this was only on the surface. Michael couldn't find any that shared the same unique properties as the source liquid, particularly its incorporation of spirit crystal components. Without this crucial material, he couldn't be certain the alternatives would actually boost his evolution points. There might have been items containing spirit crystal powder, similar to the source liquid, but since such details weren't listed in their descriptions, probably deemed unnecessary by the publishers, Michael could only overlook them. This was yet another reason why buying in person was better, though even that had its own drawbacks. "Whatever," Michael muttered. "I'll just rely on my daily evolution points and save money. Right now, I'm strong. Not strong enough, but at least strong enough not to be desperate for evolution points. What I need is experience points. Hopefully, the land of origin will finally live up to its reputation." Several thoughts and plans flashed through Michael's mind. If luck was on his side, he started to believe that reaching rank 2 might not be as difficult as he'd initially thought. Of course, that was a big if. "We're here," a voice echoed in front of Michael, pulling him out of his thoughts. It was the cab driver. "Thanks for the ride," Michael said as he stepped out of the car. "You're welcome." Michael had already paid en route, so there was no further business with the driver. He also noticed that the cab driver didn't seem particularly uncomfortable around him, which meant he'd successfully controlled his aura, at least to a degree. Before Michael's feet even hit the ground, the lively clamor of the city market reached his ears. Bayon Market. It wasn't the largest in Woodstone City, but it was well known, often referred to as a city market by those from outside the area. The market offered a little of everything, from household AI assistants to fresh groceries. Michael wasn't unfamiliar with Bayon Market. He'd visited a few times with Aunt Mia, so he knew his way around. With a clear goal in mind and plans to pursue afterward, Michael didn't waste time wandering. He went straight for his objective, acquiring ordinary creatures to turn into undead and test his talent on. In Aurora, animals hadn't changed much since the initial calamity. While it was true that some animals had once mutated into monsters, That era had passed. Now, in the living territories, animals appeared much the same as they had 2 centuries ago. Michael spent little time in the market. He avoided unnecessary complications and headed straight to the first stall he saw that sold insects as pets. Without a specific target in mind, he simply purchased what was available: a jar of ghost ants, another containing praying mantises, and jars of crickets, blue morpho butterflies, and caterpillars. These choices weren't deliberate, just what the stall owner had on hand. For now, anything would do. Michael only wanted to test how his talent affected ordinary creatures and whether it could expand beyond the typical range undead necromancers relied on. Wishful thinking, of course. It was getting darker, close to 4 p.m. in the real world. In just a few hours, Michael aimed to fill his contract slots and return to the association to sell the ones he couldn't use. His storage space was limited, and even if he could keep the corpses, they became worthless to him if undead revival failed. There was no point in holding on to something that had no further use. Even after the increase in storage space from his advancement, it still wasn't large enough to accommodate excess corpses. His original plan was to hunt creatures himself to fill future slots, but current circumstances didn't allow for that. At least not until noon the next day, and by then, he wouldn't even be able to fill more than 20 open slots before his daily points refreshed. Michael also wasn't rushing because of the state of the monsters if they stayed out of the freezer too long. Instead, he was determined not to let them become the obstacle that prevented him from entering civilization in the land of origin when it was now so close to him. Before leaving Bayonne Market and heading back to his hotel, Michael made sure to buy plenty of clothes for himself and his humanoid undead. He chose outfits that leaned toward a medieval style, leathers, coats, and the like, based on the impression he'd gotten from the people he saw passing through the gates in the land of origin. Though he worried that, despite his efforts, their appearance would still stand out, there wasn't much else he could do. Since he planned to move at night, he hoped the darkness would provide some cover. After buying clothes, and ignoring the suspicious looks he received while purchasing a suspicious number of women's undergarments, Michael returned to his hotel. At the reception desk, he also booked a week-long reservation after some consideration. Though he missed home, Michael found himself enjoying the freedom to go wherever he wanted, whenever he wanted, without needing to explain or worry his family. He'd return home eventually, but for now, he had goals to achieve. Back in his room, Michael took a quick bath. When he was done, he didn't forget to send a reassuring voice note to Aunt Mia via one of their shared social apps, while promising to send money soon. He followed through immediately, transferring $50,000 after sending the voice note. Michael knew how she'd react upon seeing that amount and hoped she'd remember to breathe before calling him. Just as he was about to set his phone aside, 2 notifications popped up, one from his email app and the other a message from a familiar contact. I should probably reply now, right? Mira. Hi, it's Mira. I'm sending this message again. Michael thought for a moment, deciding it would be rude to leave her hanging for so now. Michael, hi. That's fine, right? He muttered. He thought about it for a few seconds. Yeah, it's fine. Michael then turned his attention to the email, already guessing its contents. When he opened it, his suspicion was confirmed. Congratulations on your advancement, Awakener Michael Norman. As a genius and a favored individual of the Federation, we wish to show our support in any way we can. We wish you success on your journey, and as always, may the will of Aurora endure for 1,000,000 years. Beneath this message was a series of details, but the one that caught Michael's attention most was the increase in his monthly benefits. It went up by this much. $100,000. It was a pleasant surprise. For the next 11 months, he'd receive this amount each month, essentially $1,000,000 in total. Not bad at all when he thought of it that way. If it's this much, I wonder how much it would be when I advanced to rank 2. Michael didn't doubt his eventual advancement to rank 2. What he wasn't sure of was when. It could happen tomorrow if luck was on his side, or it might take 100 times longer, but he was certain it would happen eventually. The monthly benefit increase felt satisfying, and before Michael could even put his phone aside, he received an alert. $100,000 had just been deposited into his account. Apparently, it didn't matter when he advanced. Even if he collected his $15,000 monthly benefit as an unranked Awakener today and registered as rank 1 tomorrow, he'd still receive the full benefits for both stages without any reductions. As expected, the Federation had money to spare. Michael had already decided how he'd use his increased benefits once he advanced again. But everything hinged on that advancement. If he didn't reach rank 2 within a year, he could forget about receiving anything further. Finally done with his phone, Michael connected it to a charger and set it aside. He then grabbed the sack containing the jars of insects. The sack wasn't large, as he'd only bought 1 jar of each type. Soon, Michael carefully placed the jars on the desk in his room. Now he faced a dilemma. How do I take them into the land of origin? Living creatures couldn't enter his storage space, even if placed in a jar. They had to be dead. Given how tiny and delicate the insects were, crushing them could easily ruin their bodies, even if he tried to be careful. He was just that storage for such a delicate task. Michael pondered this for a moment, wondering if he should have bought insecticide or something similar. Then, an idea struck him: his mana. Though Michael still wasn't well versed in magic, he wasn't a complete novice anymore. As one's mana capacity increased, so did its applications beyond just casting spells. For example, it could be used for intimidation, something Michael had subconsciously done before Grace called him out. Or, in its extreme form, to kill with mana alone. Michael stared at the jars with a contemplative expression. A few moments later, he gathered the jars together and placed his hand above them. Slowly, a greenish-dark aura of mana began to seep from his outstretched hand, the energy growing denser as it enveloped the jars. Inside, the insects started to panic, their movements becoming erratic. But Michael's expression remained cold, as if what he was doing was of no consequence. He continued increasing the mana output, focusing on the image of pressure in his mind. Only when the glass jars began to tremble did he slightly reduce the intensity, fine-tuning his control. A few seconds later, you killed a common LV-1 ghost ant. You killed a common LV-1 ghost ant. You killed a common LV-1 cricket. You killed a common LV-1 praying mantis. Chapter 104 Danger? A/N. Sorry for the slow uploads lately. Real life got hectic, and I had to be on the move for a while. But I'm back now, so expect more chapters soon. Thank you for your support. So weak. Michael wasn't concerned about the lives he had just taken, something the pre-awakening him would have hesitated over, even if they were just insects. Instead, his attention was fixed on the experience points, or lack thereof, he'd gained from the insects. Nothing. They were so weak they didn't even provide a single experience point, despite being rated 1 star in the common rank. Michael felt the rating might only exist because there was no lower category than common. Even if there were, he doubted these insects would qualify. Or maybe it's not that they're too weak, but that I'm too strong to gain any experience from them, he muttered, suspicion creeping in. He hadn't come across this in the forums, nor had any post explicitly addressed it, aside from the fact that leveling up required fighting stronger or similar leveled monsters. Weaker monsters supposedly offered no benefits at a certain level. Could it be that just as fighting higher-leveled monsters grants more experience, fighting significantly weaker ones results in less to none? Michael wasn't sure, as he had no first-hand experience to confirm this. No, it's probably just the natural weakness of these insects. They're not even worth a single point. He recalled his first knowledge about the existence of demonic supernaturals a few days ago. Much of their power came from sacrificing human lives, with stronger demonic cultivators requiring larger sacrifices. This implied that human life still held significant value. But in his current situation, Michael doubted sacrificing even 1,000,000 of these insects would make a difference. Excitement crept in as Michael considered the possibilities. He was far more intrigued by the thought of raising these insects as undead and testing his talent on them. Ants that could carry dozens of something the weight as them. If such a trait could be kept even after evolution, wasn't that a terrifying potential? Michael was also excited about the prospects of the other insects. Placing the jars of now dead creatures into his mark of origin, Michael went to his bed and lay down, preparing to enter the land of origin. What Michael didn't know was that as he began connecting his consciousness to his other body, the hotel was no longer calm. While summoning his mana earlier, his novice control, though commendable for his level, wasn't perfect. With mana over 100 times that of an average human, the disturbance it caused wasn't minor. For nearly a minute, Everyone in the building felt the suffocating pressure. The air grew simultaneously stiflingly hot and chillingly cold. Though it wasn't unbearable, the discomfort was undeniable. Then, as suddenly as it came, the sensation vanished without a trace, leaving behind confusion and unease. Though no one could explain what had happened, murmurs and noise slowly started appearing throughout the hotel. In a room near Michael, two middle-aged men with rough, weathered faces sat in tense silence. If Michael had been closer to them, even as a novice necromancer, he would have sensed the faint aura of death and necromantic energy lingering around their bodies, something he was gradually becoming familiar with. "What was that?" one of the men asked, his face grave. The room these two occupied just happened to be in the direction where Michael had outstretched his hand earlier, causing them to bear the brunt of the pressure. "I don't know, but the aura felt a lot like the man the higher-ups assigned to us." "Do you think it's him?" the other man replied, his tone laced with anxiety. "I'm not sure," the first man muttered. "But seeing as no one has come for us, it could very well be him. Maybe he's signaling us to hurry up." "You're right, but damn it, the higher-ups are treating us like cannon fodder. We're literally neighbors with a branch of the Supers Association." "That's because that's exactly what we are," the first man snapped. "Stop complaining. We're the last node in the grand plan. If we succeed, we'll get enough resources to finally advance to rank 3. His serious tone seemed to steady his companion, who nodded, their shared resolve reflected in their hardened expressions. After a brief pause, the first man continued, "Let's finish everything by tomorrow morning. Last night's work, with help from our brothers at the other nodes, brought us much closer to our goal." Then, a twisted grin spread across his face as excitement bubbled within him. "In a place like Woodstone City, there aren't many strong people. This is the day the world will finally recognize us, the superior beings. We were never equal. Never." His voice dripped with madness, his eyes gleaming with unrestrained ambition. Meanwhile, Michael remained oblivious to the danger brewing around him. To him, the hotel was no longer of any concern. He was back in the land of origin. Unlike the real world, where night had begun to fall, the land of origin remained bright, the sun still high in the sky. "The air here really does feel fresher. Or maybe it's just because I've been in the forest for days now," Michael mused aloud, taking in his surroundings. Nearby, his undead stood silently, while the organized bodies of monster corpses lay ready to serve as material for creating more undead to fill his remaining contract slots. Name: Michael Norman. Class: Adept Necromancer. Level: 15. EXP: 1094/17, 718. Strength: 30.42. Agility: 41.16. Constitution: 31.72. Intelligence: 110.1. Attribute points: 30. Skills: Undead Summoning, Undead Revival, Detect, Basic Shot, Share Senses, Spearmanship, Acid Shot, Bone Spear, Slow Curse, Bone Armor, Corpse Explosion. Talent: Infinite Evolution. Class Skill: Contract Slot, 20/40. Gift: Mark of Origin. Indeed, compared to a few days ago, the Michael of now had grown stronger, and he would only continue to grow. Chapter 105: Interesting Evolution. Michael took a quick glance at his intelligence stat, knowing he'd soon need to spend a significant amount of mana again. 110, he muttered, a satisfied smile forming. Gone were the days when his agility stat could compete for the top spot. Now even agility trailed far behind. Still, Michael felt conflicted about his highest stat. Over 100 points in intelligence, yet he'd only gained 2 skills from it: Share Senses and Acid Shot. All his other magical skills, Bone Spear, Slow Curse, Bone Armor, and Corpse Explosion, came as quest rewards or through advancement. Skills like Basic Shot and Spearmanship were obtained through actions. Bone Spear had been granted upon his advancement to rank 1. It was common knowledge that acquiring a skill for every 20-point increase in a main stat was more of a rare bonus than a guarantee. Knowing this didn't make it any less frustrating, but it softened the blow. Michael shifted his focus away from his status panel. Since he hadn't yet begun the undead revival process, there was no need to allocate his attribute points just yet. With the sheer quantity and purity of his mana now, he doubted he'd run into issues reviving monsters similar to those from before. The only exception might be when using that scam of a skill, Undead Summoning, on his rank 1 undead again. After a quick glance at his surroundings, Michael prepared to get to work. As for scouting, he didn't need to bother. Michael could simply use share senses with the undead scattered within a 100-meter radius. The ones closest to his location were Lucky and Prince, who he'd checked on multiple times while storing items in the land of origin. The two had stopped bleeding and looked a bit better, at least on the surface. They were fit for combat again, though they'd still perform below their peak until fully healed. Michael suspected full recovery would come either from digesting something valuable or through evolution, which he theorized restored creatures to their prime. If he opted for evolution, Prince would be the first to recover. Prince's evolution required 125 evolution points, while Lucky's needed a staggering 625. That was a lot of points. After assessing the state of his undead through their shared connection, Michael focused on the task at hand. He retrieved the jars of dead insects from his storage space, placing them on the ground in front of him. "Which one should I start with?" he murmured, excitement evident in his voice. There were 5 types: ghost ants, praying mantises, crickets, blue morpho butterflies, and caterpillars. Though Michael wasn't well versed in these insects, the store owner had provided brief explanations about them as pets. Ghost ants were tiny, measuring about 1.3 to 1.5 millimeters in length. They were known for their speed and adaptability. Their pale bodies and dark heads made them appear almost translucent. Praying mantises were something Michael was a little familiar with. Praying mantis ranged from 4 to 10 centimeters in length and were skilled predators with powerful front limbs for grabbing and holding prey. They were known for their precision and ambush tactics, often blending into their surroundings to surprise their targets. Crickets were commonly known insects, even in another world like Aurora. They measured between 2 to 5 centimeters and were recognized for their powerful hind legs, which allowed them to jump great distances relative to their size. Blue morpho butterflies had a wingspan of 12 to 15 centimeters and were known for their striking, iridescent blue wings. Michael had to admit these butterflies were quite beautiful, but even as he thought this, the emotion in his eyes as he looked at them didn't change. The caterpillars Michael brought were also quite interesting. It was the spicebush swallowtail caterpillar. This fascinating caterpillar had a unique appearance and intriguing behavior. According to the stall owner, as a juvenile, it resembled a bird dropping to avoid predators. In its later stages, it mimicked a small snake, with large, fall-sized spots on its body to scare off birds and other threats. It was a strangely beautiful creature, and Michael took a little time to appreciate it. Perhaps this was how most of the entire insect kingdom was. Michael couldn't help but wonder how things would change if he could evolve them. In the end, Michael decided to start with the ghost ant. After carefully pulling one of the bodies out of the jar without crushing it, he placed it on the floor in front of him and immediately used Undead Revival. As the skill took effect, Michael couldn't help but feel a bit nervous. While he didn't foresee any issue with the revival failing due to it being an ant, the fact that he was trying to revive an ant, something so small and seemingly insignificant, felt odd. However, much to Michael's surprise, the revival process was not only successful, but surprisingly easy. Undead Ghost and LV1. Rank, Common. It had been much easier than expected. But whether this was because of the strength difference between them or some other reason, Michael didn't dwell on it for long. Instead, Talent, Infinite Evolution. Evolution points, 36. Evolvable. Undead Ghost and LV. 1. Sufficient evolution points. Can be evolved. Seeing the 36 evolution points, Michael didn't hesitate for long before making his decision. Evolution points. Show me your limits. As soon as Michael spoke, the same glowing light from his previous evolution experience enveloped the ghost ant's body. However, this time, there were no screams. Perhaps it was because the ant didn't have vocal cords. It simply thrashed about slightly. It didn't take long. The light around the ghost ant intensified, and slowly, its body began to grow, becoming taller and more imposing. And within moments, it had reached a meter in height. Clearly, it was no longer the ghost ant it once was. It had a new name now. Undead Spectral Ant LV2. Rank, Common. And that wasn't all. L. Your Undead Spectral Ant has gained the skill, Ghostly Camouflage. Your Undead Spectral Ant has gained the skill, Ghostly Charge. Chapter 106 Special. Your Common Undead Ghost Ant has evolved to Common Undead Spectral Ant. Your Undead Spectral Ant has gained the skill, Ghostly Camouflage. Your Undead Spectral Ant has gained the skill, Ghostly Charge. Spectral Ant. Somehow, just seeing the name made Michael feel like this wasn't a completely new race. If his assumption was correct, then it wasn't that his talent evolved his undead in random ways. It evolved them along a pre-structured path, whether they were connected to the root of that path or not. This didn't disappoint Michael. If anything, he felt excited. If the evolution of an ordinary creature could yield something exceptional, what would happen when he evolved animals like lizards or snakes? Creatures that were often said to possess draconic bloodlines or to be linked to dragon-like myths. Was there a chance he could achieve something extraordinary from such ordinary creatures? Michael's imagination ran wild for a while before he hit himself lightly on the head, forcing himself to focus. It gained 2 new skills, Michael muttered, staring at the panel in front of him. Judging by their names, they seemed like racial abilities. Whether they were or not didn't matter. He immediately pulled up the details for the 2 skills. Ghostly Camouflage, Basic Mastery, Proficiency, 2.324%. The spectral ant can blend into its surroundings, becoming semi-transparent and significantly harder to detect visually. At Basic Mastery, it becomes almost invisible in dim or shaded environments for up to 15 seconds. However, the effect does not prevent detection by enemies with heightened senses or those trained to detect supernatural creatures. There is a 30-second cooldown after use. Ghostly Charge, Basic Mastery, Proficiency, 3.03%. The spectral ant increases its speed by 40% for 8 seconds, allowing it to move in a sudden burst toward a target. After the charge, it suffers a 4-second slowdown, but the skill can be used again after a 20-second cooldown. This race seems to be one of the stronger ones among its rank and star rating, and it's not just ordinary strong. This was the impression Michael got about the spectral ant after reading the description of its 2 skills. But there was something else Michael was curious about. Not everything was written in the status panel. An ant. And what are ants known for? Their strength. The ability to lift objects dozens of times their weight. Michael didn't dare think too far ahead, but if this trait carried through its evolutions, the physically strongest undead wouldn't be his humanoid ones like the male orcs. It would be the evolved ghost ants instead. At the same level, the difference in strength would be too vast to compare. Michael turned his gaze to the undead spectral ant in front of him, observing its appearance. For one, it was a massive ant. The spectral ant was an imposing creature, standing nearly waist-high on Michael. Its sleek, obsidian-black exoskeleton shimmered faintly under the light that entered the cave, as though coated in a thin, ghostly mist. Its legs were thick and segmented, ending in sharp, hook-like claws that dug easily into the ground. The ant's mandibles were long and serrated, and looked like they were capable of crushing bones with ease, while its 6 gray eyes gave off an eerie, otherworldly aura. Along its back, faint spectral patterns pulsed rhythmically, as if alive. Its sheer size and the aura it emitted made it look like a creature born from nightmares, an ant that had transcended its natural limits and stepped into something far more dangerous. For a common rank creature, the spectral ant appeared far beyond its classification. In fact, it looked closer to a rare rank creature than some of Michael's other undead. The ant's appearance stirred another thought in Michael's mind. Ants were social creatures. Queens, kings, soldiers, workers. They had a structured hierarchy. The spectral ant didn't seem like an ordinary common rank being. If it belonged to a colony with such a system, then maybe. Nah, I'm overthinking this. I don't even have an epic grade undead yet. Pointless to dwell on it, Michael muttered, shaking his head. Refocusing, he decided to test the ant's strength. To avoid damaging the cave, which he planned to reuse, Michael stepped outside. What he discovered left him speechless. Did a random experiment of mine just land me some royal monster bloodline or something? He murmured in disbelief. Why was he shocked? 2 tons of strength at level 2. That's at least 7 times the strength of an average human. If this had come from a rare rank creature, Michael wouldn't have been surprised. But this was a common rank undead. A level 2 common rank creature rivaling and even surpassing an Awakener's strength was unheard of. At least to Michael. If he had doubts before, now Michael was certain. With another evolution, this creature might contend with the likes of Lucky and Prince. While surpassing them might be a stretch, securing third place wasn't out of the question. And the best part of it all was that, just like his other undead, Michael could have multiple creatures of the same type under his command. Since you're the first of your kind under me, if I successfully place you in the Netherworld, your name will be Ghost, Michael said in a semi-promising tone. However, Ghost didn't react. Its intelligence was still lacking. Michael didn't mind and didn't put much thought into it. After verifying the undead's strength, Michael wanted to test its skills, but he was on a tight schedule. Without hesitation, he returned to the cave and resumed reviving more creatures to evolve. Chapter 107 More Evolution. The next creatures Michael had to use his undead revival skill on next were the crickets, blue morpho butterflies, praying mantises, and caterpillars. Or more accurately, he only had to use the skill once for each, and it worked once. For Michael, who was already accustomed to occasional failures when creating undead, the back-to-back successes left him both surprised and a bit uneasy. Still, he couldn't deny he enjoyed the efficiency. If only all his attempts were this smooth. Soon, he had successfully revived one of each insect into an undead. Undead Praying Mantis LV1. Rank, Common. Undead Blue Morpho Butterfly LV1. Rank, Common. Undead Spicebush Swallowtail Caterpillar LV1. Rank, Common. Undead Cricket LV1. Rank, Common. With these new additions, Michael had now used 5 of the 20 open contract slots available to him. He still had 15 more, and if he wanted, he could create more spectral ants since he had plenty of ghost ant corpses as materials. However, Michael didn't dwell on the idea. Though he saw great potential in the spectral ants, he knew focusing solely on them wouldn't be wise. With his talent, he didn't need to obsess over the raw potential of a particular creature. If an undead wasn't strong enough, he could simply evolve it. Michael valued the versatility of his growing army and intended to maintain that diversity. Even if he stumbled upon a nest of dragon corpses, he wouldn't abandon this approach. After all, who could say if his undead wouldn't surpass dragons in the future? What mattered to Michael wasn't just the initial potential of his creations, but their usefulness and how much he liked them. For instance, while the spectral ants could overpower male orcs in physical strength at the same rank, their bodies made them less flexible in battle. They also couldn't replace the female orcs as they couldn't cast magic. Each undead had its pros and cons, and Michael's goal was to be a jack of all trades. And if possible, master of all as well. He wanted undead for the land, skies, and even the seas. A single outstanding undead type wouldn't change that plan. After all, he wasn't a specialist necromancer, and he preferred it that way. Michael's attention remained fixed on his new undead. Though he could evolve them all at the same time to save effort, he decided to take his time and evolve each one individually to better understand their unique evolutions. Since there were 4 undead to evolve, Michael chose one at random to start. Undead Praying Mantis LV1. Rank, Common. Evolve to Common for 1 evolution point. Yes, the familiar scene of his undead emitting light appeared again. Michael observed carefully and watched as changes started to manifest on his undead Praying Mantis. Just like the spectral ant, its body grew significantly, but it wasn't until the light emanating from its body faded that Michael fully realized the extent of the transformation. Another race change. A part of Michael would have been disappointed if it hadn't occurred, but the change was expected, and it was exactly what he needed. Undead Shadow Mantis LV2. Rank, Common. Yet again, another creature that seemed to have something to do with darkness. Michael observed the appearance of his newly evolved undead. The Shadow Mantis seemed like it would stand at an imposing height of nearly 1.6 meters, 5'3", if fully upright. It had a sleek, dark exoskeleton that shimmered faintly under dim light, a mix of deep black and smoky gray that seemed to absorb the surrounding shadows. Its elongated forelimbs, each over a meter long, were razor-sharp with serrated edges. It had sturdy, powerful-looking yet slender hind legs that appeared capable of launching it into swift, silent leaps, adding to its deadly appearance. By its sides were translucent wings, and when Michael had it stretch them, they extended to a span of 1.2 meters. The wings shimmered like a shadowy mirage as it moved. It moved silently, almost eerily quiet, though it was uncertain if the wings could actually allow it to glide in midair. An assassin. That was Michael's first thought after observing the appearance of the shadow mantis. Even in the insect kingdom, praying mantises were known as silent killers, and this evolution only seemed to reinforce that. Michael grew even more convinced of his theory when he checked the skills the praying mantis gained after evolving. Your common undead praying mantis has evolved to common undead shadow mantis. Your undead shadow mantis has gained the skill Shadow Cloak. Shadow Cloak. Basic Mastery. Proficiency. 5.2%. The shadow mantis wraps itself in a thin veil of darkness, blending seamlessly into its surroundings. At Basic Mastery, the skill makes it nearly invisible in low-light environments. Michael was satisfied with the overall evolution of the praying mantis. At least on the surface, it didn't look worse than the spectral ant. However, like the previous one, it also needed a field to showcase how useful it was. What was impressive was that, though he could see the shadow mantis, if not for their shared connection, even with his senses as a rank 1 awakener, it would have been hard to pick up its presence at all. Yet another odd evolution. Or are all insect monsters this powerful? Michael couldn't help but think. At common rank, these creatures already showed great potential, and Michael couldn't help but wonder how they'd fare when he evolved them again soon. If there's ever a class that controls insects, like some insect master that opposes me, I'm going all out from the start. The world was a big place, and the magical world was even bigger. It was safe to say there was a possibility that some class like that existed. Michael briefly imagined a swarm of spectral ants charging at him, and he couldn't help but shiver. With the praying mantis out of the way, Michael went for another of his new undead. Undead Cricket LV1. Rank, Common. Evolved to Common for 1 evolution point. Yes. Soon, a new form appeared in front of Michael. Undead Armored Cricket LV2. Rank, Common. The undead armored cricket stood at a modest height of around 35 centimeters, 1-1, but its appearance was anything but modest. The exoskeleton was a deep, weathered brown with streaks of black and green, providing a natural camouflage in darker environments. The armor was thicker around its back and legs, giving it a bulky, protective appearance. Its long hind legs were powerful-looking and seemed perfectly built for leaping, with sharp, jagged spikes protruding from the sides, almost like spiked shields. The forelegs were shorter but thickly muscled, ending in pincers that gave it a predatory look. A pair of translucent wings were folded against its back, and when Michael had it extend them, when extended, the wings spanned about 50 centimeters, 1-7. Michael didn't waste time, and then went on to check its new skill. Your common undead cricket has evolved to common undead armored cricket. Your undead armored cricket has gained the skill, Echoing Chirp. Echoing Chirp, Basic Mastery, Proficiency, 5.2%. The armored cricket emits a high-pitched, resonating sound that creates a disorienting echo in the surrounding area. At Basic Mastery, this sound lowers enemy accuracy by 15% within a 20-meter radius, making it harder for enemies to land successful attacks. Additionally, physical attacks have a 20% higher chance of landing on disoriented targets. Good skill. Though Michael wasn't a battle genius, he knew the value of a skill like this if used correctly. After admiring the undead armored cricket for a bit longer, Michael had it move outside the cave and went on to evolve another undead. Undead Blue Morpho Butterfly LV1. Rank, Common. Evolved to Common for 1 evolution point. Yes. A little while later. Undead Phantom Morpho LV2. Rank, Common. 'Tis quite a sight. Michael couldn't help but feel that his undead army was a little odd. He had terrifying creatures, yet they also possessed a strange beauty, something not often associated with a necromancer. At the beginning of his awakening, he had imagined his days would be spent with skeletal companions. However, although that wasn't the case, his undead still had some ferocity to them. at least until this Phantomorpho appeared. It was undeniably beautiful. The undead Phantomorpho was an ethereal creature with transparent wings that shimmer in pale blue hues, resting delicately at its sides. Its sleek, black exoskeleton, with glowing blue accents, contrasts with its dormant form, exuding an eerie beauty. Though bizarre and undeniably pretty, perhaps only someone like Michael, whose sense of reality was slowly warping, would sincerely call it beautiful. It was like looking at a black mamba snake in the eye and calling it cute. Chapter 108 Last Insect Undead. The skills of the undead Phantomorpho were quite interesting in Michael's opinion. The undead phantom had gained two with its evolution. The first skill, Illusory Mirage, Basic Mastery, Proficiency, 6.3%. Creates multiple shimmering duplicates of itself to confuse enemies. At Basic Mastery, the illusions move erratically but fade upon contact, making it harder for foes to pinpoint the real creature. A doppelganger skill? Michael mused. He refrained from calling it a clone skill, as the ability seemed incapable of physical attacks, at least at its current mastery. Use Illusory Mirage. Michael commanded the undead Phantomorpho. The previously motionless undead began to stir, its large wings fluttering gently as a thick mist enveloped the area. The surroundings grew distorted, giving an eerie, surreal atmosphere. Suddenly, Michael saw the Morpho's body dissolve into mist before him and disappeared. However, his senses told a different story. The undead Phantomorpho hadn't moved at all. It's probably weak because I'm much stronger, but even new official cultivators might struggle against this, Michael murmured, impressed. The evolution of insects in the magical world mirrored their vast potential in reality. Yet, their deviousness caught Michael's attention. Though he still had the spicebush swallowtail caterpillar to evolve, he doubted it would be any less cunning than the others. Perhaps it was because living dead creatures seemed to have an affinity for darkness, adapting to it remarkably well. Michael liked their sinister evolution, though. In his opinion, it created more flexibility. However, though he liked the evolution of the insects quite much, he was a necromancer, not an insect master, if such a class even existed. For now, Michael refrained from pushing the Morpho's mirage abilities to their limits. Its current rank and mana purity made its illusions ineffective against someone like him. It would shine at higher ranks with a higher level. With that, Michael moved on to inspect the second skill the Morpho had gained. Shifting Form, Basic Mastery, Proficiency, 6.8%. The undead Phantomorpho can alter its size, amplifying the range and power of certain skills through expansion. This was yet another skill that caught Michael's interest. In truth, all the skills he had observed over the past few minutes intrigued him, and this one was no exception. Without dwelling on the potential size of the undead phantom, he gave a simple command. As the surrounding mist dissipated, Michael felt the undead Phantomorpho's presence diminish through his senses. When the mist fully cleared, he could see its new form, a beautiful, normal-sized version of itself. Hovering gracefully mid-air, it looked like one of the most stunning creatures Michael had ever seen. Yet, it gave an unsettling impression, as though it would vanish the moment one looked away. Michael commanded the now tiny Morpho to rest on his shoulder. With a sidelong glance, he remarked, "Even if I can't get you into the netherworld, you're probably the easiest undead to transport between realms like this." After a brief pause, he added, "Since that's the case, I might as well give you a name. Your wings are blue, and you're as beautiful as the color blue. I'll call you Blue." What Michael didn't mention was that Blue was a conveniently unisex name, just in case his undead developed some sort of obvious gender after future evolutions. With Blue's evolution complete, only the caterpillar remained. Seeing as it was the largest of his insect undead, Michael decided it would be better to evolve it outside, just in case something unexpected happened. Heading to an open area in the forest, Michael immediately used Undead Revival on the spicebush swallowtail caterpillar. As he partly expected, it succeeded on the first try. Without hesitation, he initiated its evolution. A while later, the process was complete, though the result wasn't what Michael had envisioned. "A moth," he muttered, surprised. Then again, given that it had started as a caterpillar, it made a certain kind of sense. Undead Spicebush Swallowtail Moth LV2. Rank, Common. The undead spicebush swallowtail moth also had quite a huge appearance. The undead spicebush swallowtail caterpillar had evolved into a large, elegant moth with striking wings resembling the intricate patterns of the spicebush swallowtail butterfly. Its wings now shimmer with dark, iridescent blues and purples that resemble shadowy, fragmented glass. The body of the moth is long and sleek, with a shadowy, almost ethereal quality to it. Its abdomen is armored with faint, skeletal plating, and its antennae are sharp, flicking with an unsettling motion. Its size was 1.5 meters, 4 feet 11 inches, wingspan when stretched. The undead spicebush swallowtail moth also had its own set of interesting skills. Elusive flight, basic mastery, proficiency, 12%. The undead spicebush swallowtail moth can create a deceptive illusion of multiple moths during flight, capable of causing mass confusion. Venomous dust, basic mastery, proficiency, 9%. The undead spicebush swallowtail moth can release a cloud of toxic dust from its wings that lingers in the air for a short period. At basic mastery, the poison is relatively weak but still capable of numbing limbs and disorienting enemies who inhale it. Prolonged exposure can result in mild paralysis and dizziness. Shifting form, basic mastery, proficiency, 6.8%. The undead spicebush swallowtail moth can alter its size, amplifying the range and power of certain skills through expansion. The undead spicebush swallowtail moth was clearly another illusory-type creature, similar to the undead phantomorpho, with little to no direct combat power. I wonder if using them together could create some unexpected synergy? Michael mused. With the evolution of the spicebush swallowtail caterpillar complete, he was finally done filling his experimental contract slots. Now, it was time to focus on other tasks, such as filling his remaining contract slots and, perhaps, dressing up his naked orcs. Chapter 109 done. The undead spicebush swallowtail moth was named Purple by Michael, following a similar thought process to when he named Blue. With these two included, Michael now had 7 named Undead and a total of 25 undead under his control. This also meant that his next daily evolution points would amount to 26 points, provided he didn't continue reviving more corpses and turning them into evolution point generators. Of course, this wasn't possible. With the insect-related matters out of the way, Michael moved to the place where he had stored the monster corpses he'd bought from the association and began using Undead Revival on them. As for why he didn't evolve his insect Undead immediately, it wasn't because he didn't want to. It was because he preferred to do so only after successfully testing Undead Summoning on them. Just because Michael had become stronger didn't mean the skill was any less of a gamble. Its success had little to do with his personal growth. The only real benefit of advancing was that he now had more mana to try more attempts, which in turn steadily increased the mastery proficiency of Undead Summoning. Moreover, while repeated failures made it harder for an undead to enter the netherworld, ironically, the sheer number of attempts increased his chances of eventually succeeding. However, this improvement only applied to weaker monsters. When it came to monsters of a similar level or those at high ranks, Michael's odds were no better than they had been back when he was still unranked. This was why he had felt somewhat reluctant when he evolved his undead into rare rank creatures, which automatically advanced them to rank 1 without first being sent to the netherworld for his advancement quest. However, he had done what he could at the time, which was why he now had 13 undead residing in the netherworld that he could summon and dismiss at will. All of this contributed to Michael's reluctance to rush into evolving his undead into rare rank creatures, as doing so would automatically push them into rank 1, thereby making them harder to send to the netherworld. For now, he preferred that they serve as reliable evolution point providers before they either succeeded in entering the netherworld or met some other criteria that warranted their evolution. After resolving the issues regarding his undead insects, Michael resumed using Undead Revival, this time on creatures that weren't insects. However, after failing twice in a row, he felt a mix of mild frustration and unexpected relief. He really needed that dose of humility. Thanks to his constant success with the insect Undead, his mindset had been shifting in an unbalanced direction. Truly, failure is a necessary part of success, Michael muttered. having this strange yet grounding thought. Status. Name, Michael Norman. Class, Adept Necromancer. Level, 15. EXP, 1094/17, 718. Strength, 30.42. Agility, 41.16. Constitution, 31.72. Intelligence, 110.1. Attribute points, 30. Skills, Undead Summoning, Undead Revival, Detect, Basic Shot, Share Senses, Spearmanship, Acid Shot, Bone Spear, Slow Curse, Bone Armor, Corpse Explosion. Talent, Infinite Evolution. Class Skill, Contract Slot 40/40ths. Gift, Mark of Origin. Even now, Michael only felt mildly exhausted, with a relatively drained mana pool. Yet, despite all this, he still had enough mana to continue if he wanted. All of that without needing to touch his attribute points. Evidently, his intelligence stat, now over 100, was showing its merits. Now, I just need to use Undead Summoning on some of the undead, get more of them into the netherworld, and then start evolving them. The plan ahead wasn't too complicated, but it wasn't something for now. First, it's time to head back to the real world and sell off these corpses. Since his storage space wasn't vast enough to keep everything, nor was he planning to camp out in the wilderness like a cave dweller just to guard corpses when he had civilization so close to him. Besides, the wilderness wasn't exactly a freezer or corpse preservation zone. Sooner or later, even monster bodies would start to rot, which, in Michael's eyes, was practically throwing money away. They needed to go back to where they belonged, the association. It wasn't always about the money. Yes, definitely not always about the money. Before heading back, however, there was something Michael wanted to do first: equip his undead like a proper boss would. Using the connection he shared with them, Michael summoned all his undead within a 100-meter radius, excluding the wolves, to an open area in the forest. He then summoned his other orcs from the netherworld. The sight that greeted him almost blinded him. With naked bodies gathered around him, and certain parts blatantly exposed, it looked like some questionable activity was taking place in the middle of the forest. Though it didn't seem entirely necessary, Michael had the orcs wipe themselves down using body wipes he had bought at Bayon Market before dressing and equipping them. Once they were somewhat cleaner, he divided the clothes he had bought among his undead, distributing them based on their genders. Unfortunately, to prevent the clothes from being torn apart and to ensure they wore them properly, he had to personally supervise the process. Thankfully, none of them completely destroyed their outfits. Looking at his orcs, who resembled humans aside from a few obvious non-human features, Michael found himself fascinated for a moment. After dressing up the orcs, he set the female ones aside and focused on equipping the male orcs with the armor he had purchased from the association. During this time, he also took a moment to clean himself with a body wipe in the land of origin and changed into a fresh set of clothes. By the time he was done, the male orcs had finished equipping themselves with their new armor. In an instant, not only did their appearance points shoot up, but they also exuded a fierce and commanding aura. Chapter 110 Return. Titan's Aegis. Rank Rare. Type Heavy Defensive Armor. Adapts to fit the wearer, providing unparalleled physical defense. Grants moderate regeneration, restoring health gradually over time. The description made the armor seem like a mythical rank item rather than a rare rank one. Michael had to admit, though, it looked incredibly sturdy. Also, it looked cool. And most importantly, it covers the entire body. As long as they're not asked any questions or take off the armor, they won't be recognized, right? The Titan Aegis was a full set of armor. While it lacked a helmet, it came with a robe-like hood and a nose mask that concealed half the face. With the armor perfectly adjusting to the orcs' humanoid bodies, Michael believed that by covering the rest of their faces, their race would remain undetectable even up close. Compared to the intimidating male orcs, the female orcs looked almost maiden-like in their human-style dresses. Michael had tried to match their sizes based on his impressions, opting for a classic fashion sense, which may or may not have turned out well. It's ironic, but the ladies might have to stay as cave dwellers for a while. No way I'm taking them to civilization like this, Michael muttered. Unless, of course, he equipped them with armor too, which, fortunately, he still had plenty of. However, this was a problem for his future self. one that he'd address after returning to the real world. Then, he'd attempt another round of undead summoning, followed by evolving whatever undead he summoned and dismissing them to the netherworld. Thinking of his plans, Michael glanced at the talent section of his panel. Talent: Infinite Evolution. Evolution points: 31. 31 points. A decent stock, easily replenished tomorrow thanks to his full 40 contract slots. With these points, Michael could evolve several rare rank 1 undead. The thought pleased him, though it lacked the thrill he once felt when he first unlocked his talent. Back then, evolving to even 3 common rank undead had been exciting. Now, advancing to rank 1 only brought satisfaction, not elation. Michael doubted evolving his undead to rank 1 now would impact his stats at this stage. Only key undead like Lucky and Prince would offer substantial growth now. The feedback system had its nuances. For necromancers, the stronger an undead, the greater the feedback, so long as the vessel receiving it could handle the overflow. It was like pouring water into a cup. A small vessel overflowed quickly, limiting growth, while a larger one could absorb more before spilling. Similarly, Michael's vassal, himself, had grown stronger, a larger cup requiring greater feedback to see significant growth. After taking one last look around to ensure he hadn't missed anything and dismissing the undead he could back into the netherworld, Michael reconnected his consciousness to his body in the real world. Soon, a pair of green eyes opened in a well-lit room. When Michael had left the land of origin, it was already getting quite dark. Naturally, in the real world, it would only be darker, and this was confirmed when he grabbed his phone and saw that it was a few minutes past 11 p.m. It was very late, but since the association operated 24/7, Michael could still head out, and that was exactly what he planned to do. After washing his face, he grabbed his phone and stepped out of his hotel room, only to find the door of the room directly opposite his opening at the same time. A middle-aged man emerged, and their eyes met immediately. Michael frowned slightly. There was something familiar about the man's aura. It felt strangely intimate. Additionally, Michael's senses picked up traces of elemental energy subtly converging around him. A supernatural? Michael immediately suspected. Unfortunately, before he could say anything, the man simply nodded at him and went back inside his room. Weird. His aura feels so familiar. Michael was puzzled. The man's mana signature gave him an inexplicable sense of familiarity, even though it was faint. Whatever. Anyone who can give me this kind of feeling is probably a supernatural. I've been running into so many of them these past few days that seeing one in a random hotel isn't even surprising anymore. Michael shook off the thought. He closed his hotel room door, went down to the reception, returned the room key, and headed toward the Supers Association branch. With the city shrouded in darkness, Michael felt slightly more unrestrained. Taking a shortcut through a dim alley, he glanced around to ensure no one was nearby. After confirming he wasn't being watched, he vanished. A few seconds later, he reappeared in another dark alley just a few meters away from the Supers Association branch building. That felt great. For the first time since his awakening, Michael had fully utilized his stats like a proper supernatural, and the feeling was exhilarating. However, while he was still thrilled, he couldn't ignore the slight fear lingering in the back of his mind. Moving at such high speeds had been both exciting and unnerving. Everything around him felt too slow, as if time had paused, while he himself moved at an incredible pace. The sheer control he had to maintain to avoid smashing into people, which would surely kill them, or colliding with buildings made his heart race. Even so, Michael loved the experience. Not only did it feel incredible, but something that would have taken 20 minutes at a normal walking pace had taken him mere seconds. Emerging from the alley into the bright streets as if nothing had happened, Michael calmly made his way toward the association building. Upon reaching it, he stepped through its open doors without hesitation. The interior of the association was brightly lit, but noticeably emptier than it would have been during the day. Though Michael only interacted with a few staff members, his frequent visits had made some faces familiar to him, yet none of those familiar faces were present now. Clearly, even in the supernatural world, there was such a thing as shift rotations. Not bothering to dwell on it, Michael headed straight for the trade center, where he was greeted by yet another unfamiliar face behind the counter.